Ready to get the meeting started. Miss Warren, are we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors to order. Miss Warren, roll call, please.
Supervisor Giomi.
Here.
Supervisor White.
Here.
Supervisor Jones.
Present.
Supervisor Schutte.
Here.
Mayor Bagwell.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you so much. Pastor Haskins, will you do us the honor of an invocation?
Just pray. Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day, a gift of life. Help us to use it wisely. And I pray that you'd be with our mayor and supervisors today, that you grant them a degree of wisdom so that they would make decisions that would benefit our community and all who make Carson City their home. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I would be honored, since she's here to talk about the Constitution, if Patricia and her granddaughter would lead us in the, is that your granddaughter? Did I get that right? Would you lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to start with our public comment, and just so the public is aware, I looked at the sign-in sheet, and to be conducive to the public and to try to help clear out the room because of issues, we will be moving item 14D and 14E to right at item 12 on the agenda. So it will be immediately after the consent discussion. We will move those items up on the agenda. Okay, thank you so much. Now, do I have any public comment on the phone?
We do have one caller on the line.
Okay.
Caller, when you hear the two beeps, it'll be your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Donna Kuster DePaul.
Go ahead, Ms. DePaul, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment on 14D, which is coming up, and I will be unavailable to be there in person. I have been a resident on West Nye Lane for 30 years, and I've watched Silver Oak grow since the beginning of time. I was looking and reviewing what they would like to do at West College Parkway and Oak Ridge with the rezoning, and I have had absolutely no issues at all with that subdivision going in there, other than traffic concerns. And Mark Turner has always worked with we residents, whether we live in Silver Oak or not, or we're adjacent to it. We have a beautiful connectivity with walking and great pathways and a nice park. but the biggest issue I see with that development in general is Oak Ridge and West College Parkway. People just drive like crazy on it. And if you're going to go ahead with the zoning and accepting that subdivision, I would just greatly appreciate somebody looking at a roundabout in that area, because there needs to be something to slow the traffic down, especially for we pedestrians that use it for a walking path.
Thank you, Ms. DePaul. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. I have on the, is there, that was the only caller? Is anyone else called in?
There are no other callers on the line at this time.
Okay. I have a Patricia, is it Tooney? Toon, come on up, please, if you wanted to.
Thank you so much. I appreciate getting to be here in person. My granddaughter, as I said, is getting her civics lesson today.
Press that button.
Okay. So my name is Patricia Toon for the record. September 17th is fast approaching, and it's Constitution Day, of which I was not even aware of until a few weeks ago. I am surprised at how many have not heard of this date, even though in 2004, Public Law 108-447 was signed. Per the National Center of Constitutional Studies, this law states that the head of each federal agency or department shall not only provide educational and training materials to new hires, but also to employees every year thereafter. The law also requires any educational institution receiving federal funds for a fiscal year to hold an educational program on the United States Constitution on September 17th of every year. Any public or private school not in compliance may lose access to their federal educational funding. It looks like 90% of schools are not in compliance, as well as agencies. Nearly every problem in America could be solved by restoring the solid political and economic principles from the preamble to the amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Our Constitution is the most influential document in American history. It was signed by 39 brave men willing to risk everything. They weren't concerned about their political careers. They were patriots that loved our country. Many today have never read the Constitution. Our educational institutions don't teach it, even though they're required. Many representatives don't abide by it. Public servants take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend it, yet have no idea the oath they have sworn to. Our Constitution has served as the basis for similar documents around the world. While most constitutions last less than 20 years, ours has endured for more than a couple of centuries. I believe the difference in ours is ours was founded on the creed that all men are created equal, equality, not equity, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our Constitution recognizes our rights are given by our Creator, not our elected officials. Our Constitution has given us the greatest form of government the world has ever known. If you doubt that, look at how many are flooding into our country. No one's leaving the country that I've noticed. On August 5th, I sent emails to all. I haven't heard from anybody except for Mo White, and I appreciate that. I'm anxious to hear what the capital city of Nevada has planned. At the very least, I would hope, I know it's kind of late in the game, I would hope there could be patriotic ribbons down Carson Street at the Capitol, like we celebrate everything else. This year's caused a lot of division. I think Constitution, it's a nonpartisan issue. I think it's a great way to bring our city together. It's a great way to let our city shine. We didn't see anything noted for the city celebrating, so another grandmother and I just took it on ourselves, and we've decided to meet at the Capitol September 17th at 4 p.m., and we invite you all there. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much. I will let you know we are doing a resolution for that, so we'll be happy to share that with you. Okay, next, if there's a Benjamin Miller wanted to testify. Okay, Benjamin, public comment.
Is this already on? Good morning. My name is Benjamin Miller. I'm an aspiring author here in Carson City. I'm also a contender for the 911 Supercharge Committee. I'd like to be so bold today just to give a few distinct notes about item number 14B. I have no doubt that the unemployment spike from last year and its complexities have caused a considerable amount of just correlated loss in the housing market. I believe this plan to allocate funds from this source is a swell example of what to do when life gives you lemons. And should the projects that would be the result of this item passing be approved speedily, it seems like Now is a rather quiet time in the region to adequately decide the future of consolidating those plans. If a large portion of land off Nye Lane or otherwise is to be used to conscript new housing sometime soon or sometime later, it seems better to do so sooner with the respect that the local economy stays level. This is the type of plan that has few drawbacks and can only benefit the people, possibly both long and short term. From what the last census statistics show, I don't think I'd sound foolish in interpreting the rising population as well as ample housing thereof as potential for a larger economic boom. I'd also like to just give a quick praise to Lisa Schweet. I pronounced your last name wrong again. Sorry about that. Shooty? All right, sorry about that. She was a middle school teacher of mine back in 2012, 2013, something like that. Definitely an inspiration to me, and I think you, as well as the rest of the board, are taking the safe steps towards keeping the city and local infrastructure together during this period of history. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I have Michael Moriarty.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to speak on agenda items 14D and E, the proposed 52-unit dwelling on College Parkway. Within the package that was sent out under conditions of approval, they do not require addressing the fact that waste management trucks, FedEx, UPS, Postal, Amazon, and other delivery trucks will be unable to turn around on these proposed streets and will have to back out. Snow removal was also an issue. How can this possibly not be a condition of approval when the serious safety issue was raised by the Planning Commission chair himself? The site map should have never been approved in the first place solely based on this issue, but it was. I seriously question the judgment, competence, application of common sense, and conflict of interest by some on the Planning Commission. Several of the commission members have an obvious relationship with Mr. Turner. While not illegal, it is a serious conflict of interest that erodes the integrity of the Planning Commission and those employed by the city and those voted to serve citizens of Carson City. Is there an oversight committee that looks at issues like this, or would it be filed with a grand jury? I'm sorry, but it's unacceptable. Letters of support for this project were sent in by Heidi McFadden and Christina Rice. Both gave their addresses, but failed to mention they stand to gain large commissions on this project as realtors for RCM Realty. Of course, they want sales generated in the $26 million range for the 52 units versus $12 million range that single-family homes consistent with the rest of Silver Oak would bring in. Money, money, money. By not disclosing the large financial interests they have in this project speaks to character, integrity, and ethics, or lack thereof. Doyle Catafias sent in a letter of support, but failed to mention he owns Deck Electric, which does electrical work for Lantern Investments and Mr. Turner. Again, he has a large financial interest in this project. Character, integrity, and ethics are missing. Money, money, money. There are more letters to support by people with financial interest or are employed by Mr. Turner, but I only have 3 minutes. There's many conflicts of interest here. In its appeal letter to setback variance, Manhart Consulting, on behalf of Lantern Investments, and I quote, "It is also our belief that voting against staff recommendations without an argument substantiated by fact is arbitrary and capricious. The code states a 30-foot setback for this project. I would use the same arbitrary and capricious argument for those on the planning board that voted to approve the site map even after the board chair pointed out serious safety issues with this. I respectfully ask the Board of Supervisors to vote no on agenda items 14D and 14E. The builder is very experienced and talented, and I'm quite sure can come up with a project for this property that is safe, profitable, and consistent with the rest of Silver Oak development. Thank you."
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty. Next, I have, and they might want to come up together, it's their choice, George and Chris Nash.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is George Nash. I live on Oak Ridge Drive, and I'm here for 14E on your itemized list. I noticed in the report from the Planning Commission that on page 535, the Department of Energy, of Engineering stated that the sewer pipeline, which I believe they call the College Parkway sewer line, is at its capacity down on the downstream end. And my question is, or my thought is, if the sewage line is at a capacity, how many bathrooms are going to be involved with this high-density complex? We know there's going to be X number of kitchens, which either be 48 or 52. How many bathrooms are you going to plug into a sewer that's already at its capacity? The second thing that I noticed when the engineer was giving testimony at the Planning Commission, they're talking about the traffic flow study that they've all been using for College Parkway in order to put up this high-density complex. That traffic flow study was made in 1993, almost 30 years ago. I think common sense would dictate that the traffic is a lot heavier on College Parkway today. 1993, there were no houses. The development, I guess it's known as a Silver Oak development, wasn't there. The golf course was initiated in 1992, and I suspect that the golf course wasn't even finished by 1993. The houses were in and around the golf course, and the fairways weren't there. I would respectfully suggest that somebody do a new traffic flow study and update that so we know exactly what we're dealing with. The left turn lane, the turn onto Oak Ridge Drive, already backs up into the single lane on College Parkway at that spot and brings traffic to a halt. It happens a couple times a day, usually, busy times, even now that the college is minimum because of the virus. So I foresee if the complex does eventually go through in 5 years or so, you're going to have a lot of people up here requesting to do something about the jammed up traffic on College Parkway. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nash?
Am I on? Okay.
Green.
What is unique about the I'm Christine Nash. What is unique about the project that warrants changing the original planned setback and zoning from commercial to high-density residential in a single-story, single-family community? That's my first concern, is why are we changing? What are the specific reasons why we are changing? And then my main concern about is the off-road parking. In this commercial project, I imagine they would want the egress, if this were a commercial project, they would want the egress and ingress on College Parkway. Plus, they would require to have adequate off-street parking. This project has 35 planned off-street parking spaces. These units will have 3 to 4 bedrooms. And in this day and age, everybody over 16 pretty much has their own car. So I'm guessing that most of the off-street parking will be used by the residents, leaving guests to park on the street. Oak Ridge Drive was poorly planned from the get-go. It is only 31 feet. My husband and I were out there this morning in the dark measuring it. It's only 31 feet wide. If one car parks on it, it's a 1.5 lane road. If 2 cars park on it, it's a 1 lane road. The parking is already an issue on weekends and holidays, and the zero landscaping on the house side of the Oak Ridge Drive have big rocks, and it was not planned for people to park by. They have to park farther into the street to get out of their cars because of the big rocks from the landscaping. Poor planning on top of poor planning is irresponsible. With it, whether it's legal or not. If you must okay the variance, have them add more parking, not more units, more off-street parking. It really is a problem, parking already, and there's nothing there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. I have Scott Munson signed up. And while he's coming up, if there's anyone that's come in since the original time that would like to sign in to do public comment, there's a sign-up sheet right there. Thank you. Mr. Munson?
Good morning, I guess, to everybody. Appreciate y'all taking the time to hear us out here. I don't even know where to begin with this project. Some of you are probably tired of hearing from me. I've been the squeaky wheel. I've taken up far too much of everyone's time, and I'm going to start off by saying I do appreciate those of you who have actually taken the time to speak to me on the phone. This is my first real interaction with government. I've always voted and done that sort of thing, but seeing the actual operation of government in process and administration in process has been eye-opening and terrifying at the same time. You know, it's very interesting that we started this whole operation today with the bit about the Constitution. And I thought it was very interesting that it's of the people, by the people, and for the people, not of the rich, for the rich, and the powerful. We are in a situation where, as private citizens, we are sitting here begging for you to try and help us out in a situation where we're fighting against people like Manhard, who are professionals at designing communities so that it can get past every single law, most of which haven't been updated in 30 to 40 years. Times change, people change, operations change, the world changes. The world has changed, and Carson City, unfortunately, hasn't kept up with a lot of it. The rules that we're using to approve this project or to consider this project are rules that are out of date. Most of the people drive pickup trucks these days. The parking spaces that are listed in this community are going to be 18.5 feet long. That is not nearly adequate for a 21-foot long pickup truck, which is the standard size of a full-size truck these days. That's going to spill over into the surrounding community. It's going to create further problems, right? You cannot sit there and just say that the HOA is going to take care of it, because what you're sitting there doing is you're passing the buck again, like the board of, or the planning commission did to you all with a 3-3 vote. They sent you guys an incomplete recommendation. And then what's going to end up happening is if this goes forward, then you're going to say, well, we're just going to go ahead and let it go forward. And then we're going to trust the HOA that they're going to take care of things. And ultimately, if this goes sideways, who's going to end up paying for it? The citizens that live here. We're coming to you now, and we're sitting there saying, please hear us. You need to listen to us. You need to hear us. None of us opened a mouth to do a peep when Mark and them developed the other side of John Mencken's Park. That's an entirely appropriate development based upon the community that's there. What we now have is anything but that. It's absolutely unclear what we're trying to accomplish with this development here. During the last meeting, it was said that these projects would not be able to brought to, or these homes would not be able to brought to market for less than $475,000, most likely. That's before any upgrades, and that's in today's numbers. With inflation happening, not with the price of everything going up, I wouldn't be surprised if they're $550 or more by the time these things actually come to market. And we were told to go look at the projects on Mills Landing because that's the most similar project in this town as to what it looks like. Mills Landing has driveways. These will not. And you're talking about 20 by 20 garages that are going to be entirely inadequate. And again, we're going to have to trust the HOA that any resident here is going to be putting their cars in their homes. Furthermore, when you look at this project, right, are we trying to accomplish a level of housing that allows more people to have a chance to get into the market and buy homes? If so, why are we placing this project in the most expensive neighborhood in Carson City? It doesn't make sense. If we're looking to give more housing, there are much more affordable areas you could do in here. This is not the area for it. Lastly, I want to cover one other issue, which is of particular offense to me. Actually, I'm going to say two other issues. The homeowners and people who own land in that area were all notified of the project when it was coming up. I know that the Sierra Place Senior Living Center was also notified. The ownership was. Have any of you given a single thought to the fact that you have a dilapidated Kmart center next to it that the elderly cannot walk in. And now the one sidewalk that they use to exercise every morning where they walk up from Oak Ridge and back down to their place is now going to be sliced in half. And you're going to have 52 homes pouring cars out at all times of the day, further limiting and trapping them in their own facility. I know that the average citizen that's a resident of that doesn't get a notification of that because they don't own the property. But the big money did. Do you think they care? Probably not. So moving on, the last thing which is of the most offense to me, and this is what I want to follow up with what Mike Moriarty spoke to earlier, is the bullying and the behavior of the people in this town toward the citizens here. We have a board up here that's supposed to be protecting us, and we're supposed to be having a dialogue that's back and forth where we discuss exactly how we're going to be talking about an issue. Is it the right fit for our community? Does it make sense? Are we doing the right thing for the future of this town? And all I've heard, whether correct or not, is that, well, I need a legal reason to do something. I need this, I need that. I have to do it. I can't disapprove a project just because I don't like it, right? Okay, let me tell you something else. We specifically on the special use permit, it talks about, I think it's item number 2, it talks about how you have to be able to prove a financial detriment in order to stop a project in its tracks. Can you tell me a single place in the United States where property values haven't increased over a 10-year period? You could pick the worst street in the worst neighborhood in the worst county in the United States, and it still goes up because we have inflation. It is an impossible standard to prove. Pork chops are up 40%. Should I have invested in those? Cereal's up 62%. Milk is up 38%. Eggs are up 61%. Where does it end? Everything gets more expensive with time. So how am I supposed to prove a financial impact of things? What I need to ask all of you is look at this from a logical standpoint. If every morning you had to open your door and right in front of your house was a 52-unit development that was going to be purging cars onto that street all day long on 3.5 acres, stacked high, no driveways, inadequate parking, next to an elderly folks home with one way in, one way out, is that really something that you think people are going to say, yes, that's what I need in my neighborhood. I need that. I want one of those right next to my house. I want to open the door and that's the first thing I see. Is that at all appropriate? That's what we're here to talk about. We support development of this town. We understand this town needs to grow. We need to do better. We have to be responsible with the type of growth that we're doing. I'm here to tell you all, we want to support you. We want this community to grow. We want it to succeed. But this is not the right application. There are ways that people can make money, and we need to find a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. I have Nona Peachy. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong.
Yes, okay.
And I'll push it back. It has to be green. There you go.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Yes, my name is Nona Peachy. I am not familiar with this speaking to the city, but I feel very strongly that our voices need to be heard. I agree with most of the comments that have been made regarding this proposed development for Silver Oak. The only thing I think we do have driveways in the plan, but that you all can question and look into. Scott probably knows more about it than I do. I just feel that there's a lot of common sense that hasn't been used in this whole project. For instance, the traffic. Yes, the last traffic study was done in 1993. A lot of construction has happened since then, and a lot of construction is planned and underway. There's a lot of construction underway. So we really don't know what the traffic will be like. But in doing their estimate, Mark Turner, or the developer, hired someone or has someone select someone to do the traffic estimate. That sort of seems like the common sense is that you would have someone be a neutral party to do that. The estimates that were made, I thought, were very low. For 52 units, for there only to be 23 peak hours in the morning and 28 peak hours in the afternoon seems very low for 52 units, when my understanding is the conservative estimate for the number of cars for the unit for a household is 2.5 cars. I think that's a low number. And so they're estimating that 18% of the cars, if we still use the 2.5 cars, would that be 18% of the unit, of the cars that are in that unit that would be going out in the morning, and 23% in the afternoon. I think that's very low. Even if you have retirees in this, and that is even questionable with your having these be proposed townhouses instead of one-story homes. I don't know 70 and 80-year-olds that are looking for a two-story townhome. So I think that there really is a compromise. Mark Turner does fabulous construction. This is nothing against him personally or professionally. We live in one of his homes and we absolutely love it. It's just that 52 units is excessive and it's not common sense for this property. And so I respectfully request that the whole traffic perspective be looked at, whether it fits code or not. If it doesn't fit common sense, what are we doing here? It doesn't make common sense to have 15 units on these acres. It doesn't make sense to have this be high density when the Silver Oak is single-family homes. And it just is very it's just very disappointing. I also am concerned about the communication that was done regarding this, and I guess it's very standard for you only to contact people within 600 feet. Well, there are thousands of people that are affected by this intersection that have no notification of this proposed project at all. There's no sign on the property, and I understand there's no zoning requirement to do that. But all the people that are going to and from the college, all the people up in Timberline, all of the new construction that we don't know what that will be, the communication has not been there. Also, the communication hasn't been accurate. It has represented has not, and I think that we would have more of an outcry if people knew what was going on. And I'm very concerned, too, that what communication was done by local citizens was torn down, and number of us received a threatening letter from Mr. Turner. So I guess he doesn't think it's a done deal, but I don't like receiving a threatening letter at my doorstep. And I hope that you don't want to put your stamp of approval on that kind of behavior. So as our elected officials here to represent us all, I ask respectfully for you all to make the best decision for us all. And you have a choice between making a decision that is best for the public, who has the most to lose by this proposal, or Turner and Foley, who have millions of dollars to gain. The public is concerned about their property value, the safety of the pedestrians and traffic, the increase in traffic, as well as the parking. And understand that Turner and Foley want to make money, and they're cramming in as many units as they possibly can. There's got to be a compromise. And residential use is fabulous, and that has been approved. It being subdivided is approved, that's fabulous. But please, there is a compromise. We can have single-family homes without detached walls is a compromise, or much, much fewer high density. But at a minimum, I respectfully request you all to deny this setback variance completely. The developer can compromise. He can shrink the number of units to resolve many of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peachy. I believe Mr. West signed in. Aaron, do I see him? See out in the foyer? No? Did he leave? Okay, and then thank you. Thank you. We happen to have a big day with employee appreciation too, sorry. So we're crowded today. Mr. West?
Mayor, Supervisors, thank you. For the record, Aaron West, CEO of the Nevada Builders Alliance. Thought I was sneaking in relatively unscathed, but wanted to appear in person in relationship to, well, I was just coming for agenda item 14A as it relates to the renewal of the contract, an extension with Charles Abbott Associates. The Nevada Builders Alliance and our over 1,000 member companies have actually had, continue to have great interactions with the city and with their contracted provider for building department services. I think this concept, when we originally worked with the city to develop it, was very innovative, and we've actually used this as an example now in other jurisdictions of a very successful model. So I think you guys should be proud of that, and so we're excited to. We hope that this relationship will continue in the years to come. In looking at the agenda, I also wanted to get on the record in support of item 14B. I do a lot of work with Bill Brewer and his group over at Nevada Rural Housing. We're all a part of the Nevada Housing Coalition, and we are doing everything we can to try and address some of the affordable housing needs in our community. So thank you for that. And then just since I'm here as it relates to item 14D and E, this is a great utilization of an existing zone property. The intent of that property was always to have this use on it. And the biggest thing within our community right now is trying to address that missing middle. We really, we have gaps in our housing availability. So just wanted to get on the record in support of that project, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. West. I appreciate it. The last one I have signed up is Mr. Gacci. I'll get to Mr. Shirk. It's Mr. Gacci's turn, and then you're free to come up. Mr. Gacci? He's just lining up. It's fine.
I'll be brief. I'm talking about number 14C, the East Nye Lane project close to Airport Road and East Nye Lane. My main concern there is that East Nye Lane is in really bad shape. It's got a big ditch, a 3-foot ditch on the south side of it all the way down to Tenaya. And that road needs to be brought back into the 21st century if you're going to put another 61 homes in there. And down at the intersection of Airport Road and East Nye Lane, you have a huge problem with the mini market there, loading and unloading product to sell. They're blocking the road. People have to go out into the other lane or off into the dirt. There needs to be a traffic signal there for the first responders to get through Airport Road when there's an emergency. Otherwise, you're going to have people pulling out of that stop sign and running into them. That all needs to be paved. There needs to be crosswalks there, and East Nye Lane needs to be brought up to specs with pavement and get rid of that ditch.
Thank you, Mr. Gacci. Thank you. Mr. Shirk?
Is it on? Before I begin, thank you. Before I go, there's a sign in the door that says masks must be worn in city buildings, and 2 board members are sitting up here with no mask on. I'd like to point that out. Also, when people speak up front and they take their mask off, you need someone here from the health department or wipes that you can wipe this down. You're not supposed to take your mask off.
I know.
Okay, so today, this board will again approve another consent agenda in the amount of $255,207.70. Since January 7th, this board has approved expenditures which now total $11,903,639.50, plus or minus. This board has consistently approved this agenda item without so much as a discussion on any level. Board members were elected to manage our tax dollars, and to do so, you need to have discussions. Today's agenda item 14C uses the term applicant. Agenda item 14D uses lantern investment mentioned, and the term applicant is used again. Agenda item 14E, the term applicant is used yet again. Searching through these agenda packages, the applicant's name is never revealed as far as I can see. The term applicant is used rather than the person's legal name in the agenda documents. Disclosures of all applicant's name or any other pertinent information the city has regarding any agenda item should be mandatory. Not providing all information the city has pertaining to an agenda item could be considered a violation of full disclosures. Previously, I have mentioned that the mayor had taken her picture at the Banks Saloon, and I've learned that this business contributed funds to the mayor's campaign. Board members should disclose if they have received any donations from any person or business whose agenda item is presented and requires a vote of the board. On the subject of voting, here is a voting record of our elected officials from January 7th to June 17th of this year. The vote tally would be as a board, redevelopment, or health members, or any other parameters the board members voted in. Lisa, Ward 4, voted yes 99.7% of the time and voted no or absent 0.3% of the time. Stan, Ward 3, voted yes 99.8% of the time, voted no or absent 0.2% of the time. Maurice, Ward 2, voted yes 94% of the time, voted no 6% of the time, which is more than this entire board combined. Was absent 0%. Stacy, Ward 1, voted yes 96% of the time and voted no 1% of the time. Absent 3% of the time, which is more than this entire board combined. Lori, Mayor, voted yes 99.9% of the time and voted no or absent 0.1% of the time. Most likely there's a small margin of error in the vote tallies. However, the percentages would remain very similar. Minutes of the Board of the Supervisors meeting held on July 15th will now be approved today, August 19th, and released for public access, which contains the voting records of the board for that meeting. The Board of Supervisors voting records can and should be published on the city website within 24 hours of when the board voted. Citizens should not have to wait 35 days for voting results to be released. This is entirely wrong. In the newspaper, I read an article titled, "Mayor Seeks Feedback on How to Fund Road Repairs." Basically, this was an unpersuasive, unimpressive, and unconvincing article. Mentioned in the article is a useless road repair survey citizens are asked to participate in. I highly recommend the survey be redone or deleted because it is a massive disaster, similar to our streets. If the mayor and the board really want to find funds to repair our streets, can they? Yes. Should they? Most definitely yes. Will they? Heck no. In the mayor's campaign, she had mentioned a potential buyer for the Ormsby House. This should be the next topic for the discussion when the meeting of the mayor and the citizens occur. I want to remind the board again that this September 11th is the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 tragedy that occurred in the United States of America. Carson City and the elected officials should honor those whose life was lost that day. Regarding this event, I would like to apologize to Guy Farmer for my comments about him leaving this event. It was inappropriate. This is America, and you're free to leave any event at any time, regardless if the attendees are bowing their heads in prayer. Thank you for your time, and you still don't have your mask on, and it's on the door, wear a mask. And this is what's wrong with this board. Allow them to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Shirk. I don't have anyone else that has signed up for any public comment, but is there anyone? You've already done your 3 minutes of public comment. Do you have an item that has not already been discussed? Nothing brand new? So, thank you. I appreciate that. If it was brand new and it was something that really needed to be said, I wouldn't have a problem. So, anybody else? Nope. Okay. Then we're going to close the public comment and move on to approval of our minutes. We're on agenda item number 6 for those that are following along. Anybody have any corrections or changes to the July 15th minutes? If not, I'll accept a motion, please.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of the Board of Supervisors from July 15, 2021, as presented.
I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Jones. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We're going to move on to our special presentations under item 7A, which is the length of service, where we congratulate our employees. I'm going to come down and do that part. And the board will stand behind so that we can get photos and do some congratulations. Okay. So, the first one, look at this. Probably the first guy I knew in the city, actually. Dustin Booth. Woohoo! I actually knew him before I was on the board because he liked to inspect my restaurant. Dustin does a really good job for us, and 25 years. He only has 25 to go. I mean, you know, that's all I ask of you. Not much, not much. Just thank you so much for all that you do. He works with our health department. He's been very helpful through this pandemic. I just think we couldn't do it without him. We have great employees, and thank you so much. Am I stalled long enough, Nikki? I'm working on it. You got 2 seconds. She just wants you to do it. 2 seconds. Okay. Oh, there you go. Nikki, did you want to say something?
Congratulations, Dustin. He has done a lot for the health department. He has seen that health department grow and has really been instrumental in that. And I just want to say thank you for all that you have done for this community.
Thank you. Stay to the pictures. You don't get to leave for the picture. Okay, the next one we have is Morgan Tucker, a sergeant. 15 years. Wow. Thank you so much for all you do. I'm just so proud of just all of the staff that works for Carson City, but 15 years is a long time, and I'm just doubling everything minimum, so 15 more, that's about right for 20. You're only going to go to 25? Oh, come on. I'm trying really hard today to keep continuity in the system, and we got to celebrate our good officers. So thank you for all that you do, and hang around for the final picture. Thank you. Okay, we have Michelle Garcia. Oh, I hear this is good. Michelle. And she's been with for 5 years. What
I go by Mickey, so I'm like,
I know. Who?
Who's that?
Who? I know, huh? Thank you for all you do for us. We really appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you. I just feel so exciting today. Look at all this. And how about Ryan Greb, our deputy sheriff of 5 years? I do get to say 20 more, right? 25. He's going to go for the 30 year, right? You're going to be there forever. Thank you so much for your service to our community. Thank you. How about Corey Moore, our senior fleet services tech? There you go, 5 years of service. I'll just try for 40 years out of you, you know.
12 left.
12?
Yeah, and then I'll be retired.
12 and 5, that doesn't equal a good number. That's all, yeah.
I'll have 30 years in person.
Oh, you worked somewhere else before us, but we're the best. Oh, I knew you were gonna say that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, how about Cody Peak with alternative sentencing? 5 years. Whoa! Sounds like a fan club to me there, Cody. I know what great work. I've seen you in action, and really, Carson City is so proud to have you on our team. Thank you so very much. Hey, you guys, everybody come on up for a picture. Come on back in. And if the board will please come join us for a picture. It's such a good day to celebrate. Can we take a picture? Yes, absolutely. Get you the full picture, and then if you want just one with you guys.
Or can we shift down so we get the flags?
Yeah, we're going to have to shift down a little bit.
Yes. Okay. Might have to spread, there you go, spread some of you a little. Get in. We have a lot of employees today, thank you all.
Get over it.
Spread a little more.
Need more practice.
Yeah, there you go. And then, you guys want to scoot in?
I think she's gonna jump in on the next picture. We'll invite everyone from that works with coworkers and everything. Perfect. Hey, if we have any family or coworkers and things that would like to join in the picture, come up and celebrate with us. Absolutely. It's worth it. Oh, no, you're not sneaking away. Nice try. The idea is to add to the picture, not take away. Come on in. Do you want to stand? He's your uncle. Very cool. I used to work with him. That's right. Celebration. I love it.
Wow.
There's not going to be a picture big enough for this. Good luck. Yeah. Reach, what if you do it like from the end? Yeah, come on up. It's a good idea. There's a lot of room.
Supervisor for a day.
Come on up.
There you go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm tall.
Stand back. Hi.
Dustin, I'm going to give you bunny ears. And if you want to come over this way.
Slide down a bit. We can slide down a little bit. Yeah. Go ahead. I know.
We're tall.
Me too. You're almost
I
tall.
know. She's got heels on today.
Yeah, go ahead. Step up.
Can't see you smile.
I'm
Beautiful,
smiling.
beautiful smile.
Just got to take my word. Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, what's happening there?
Oh, that one goes in my bag.
Okay, that's Lori's, this is mine.
Give just a moment. Did you have a question? Can I help you, ma'am?
May I make a 1 minute comment?
I was just hoping to have a traffic study done.
Okay, we can have somebody talk about the traffic.
Yeah, we wrote that note down, so thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Does any member have an item they would like pulled? Supervisor Jones? No? You're ready? Oh, just clear you, sorry. Okay, then with that, I'll take a motion, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item 8A, 9A, 10A, and 11A.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Okay, as promised earlier for the public, so that we can help them move along in their day, we are going to take up item 14D and 14E. We're going to start first with 14D, which deals with the appeal. Let you have just a second to get set up there.
Mayor, can I speak first?
Absolutely. Ms. Sullivan, you may feel free to go first.
Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. I'm not going to speak, I'm going to speak in general terms, and I'll let Heather Ferris, the planning manager, speak specifically to the application that's before this board. Listening to public comment, I feel I need to say some things. In terms of noticing is not limited to first-class mail. The city also notices on its website, on the state's website, as well as in the newspaper. So we recognize that there are interested parties who maybe aren't going to receive first-class mail, and we do, and actually we post on local bulletin boards as well. So we do outreach above and beyond the first-class mail. Secondly, there was a report about percentages of votes. The staff, and I need to thank this board for this, has the ability to say no, and we say no early on. If an applicant comes to us, regardless of who that person is, if it's something the staff cannot support, we readily advise them we cannot support this. We don't want people to go to pay money to get to know and to spend time to get to know. We feel it's good customer service to say no quickly and early, and we do it. So if the percentages seem high, it's probably because people are hearing no early, well before anything gets before this board. When the staff or the commission, or I suspect this board, looks at any application, we look at the substance of the application, we look at the city's policies, we look at the city's regulations. We are blind to who is making the request. That does not play into our decision-making. And so when you see staff reports that refer to the applicant, it's because it's the applicant. Fill in the blank. It doesn't matter who that person is. We're looking at the substance of the project. There was a citizen who was concerned about the letters that were received on the application. Some of those letters are from people who live close to the project. Some of them are from people who don't live close to the project. As this board knows, and as the staff knows, and as the commission knows, we see this all the time. We recognize that sometimes there's people who aren't physically really close to the project who are writing letters in. And again, I can speak for the staff, and I think I speak for the Planning Commission when I say the focus is on the substance and not necessarily who the writer is or where they live. So those are my introductory comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reese, were you going to start us off, please?
Madam Mayor, with your permission, I was going to let Ms. Ferris start us off and give us an overview, and then I will follow up with the appeal.
Ms. Ferris?
If I can, I'd like to take 14D and E together because they are so intertwined. So
I'll open the items so that the testimony can fit for both agenda items. We will take separate motions.
Thank you. So first, I'll give a brief overview of the project in its entirety, and then I'll talk specifically about actions taken by the Planning Commission. The project site consists of 2 parcels totaling 3.45 acres in size, and they're zoned neighborhood business planned unit development with a high-density residential master plan. The applicant is seeking approval of a tentative subdivision map to subdivide the 3.45 acres into 52 lots for an attached single-family development with 25,266 square feet of common area open space. 2 points of access are proposed to connect to Oak Ridge Drive and West College Parkway, with the interior roads proposed to be privately owned and maintained. I would note that the connection to West College would be right in, right out only. The project site is located within the Silver Oak Planned Unit Development, commercially zoned parcels, which this is, within this PUD are limited to those uses outlined in the zoning code. Per the municipal code, a residential use is a conditional use in the neighborhood business zoning district and therefore requires a special use permit, subject to the supplemental standards outlined in Division 1.18. There's no maximum density within a non-residential zoning district, subject to meeting the height, parking, and open space requirements. The overall design concept is single-family attached or townhouses with a lot size of 1,000.
Just 1 second, I think the phone's bleeding in or the webcast. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
The proposed lot sizes are 1,237 square feet. The lots include all aspects of the buildings, including patios and porches. The applicant proposes 3 floor plans, and each unit will be 2-story and will range in size from 1,529 to 1,627 square feet. Private open space will be provided in the form of patios and porches for each unit, again with the 25,266 square feet of common open space throughout the project. With regard to parking, we heard a little bit about that. It is proposed to be provided via 2-car standard garages for each unit. And then additionally, on-site guest parking will be provided. 35 spaces will be provided, which is 9 more spaces than is required according to the code for guest parking.
Can you tell me the size of that guest parking as you're going?
I believe it's 9 feet wide by 18.5, which is standard. As I mentioned, a special use permit is required for a residential use in a non-residential zoning district. At their July 28th Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission voted 5-1 with 1 absent to approve the special use permit. And the Planning Commission has the authority to approve special use permits. Therefore, that is not before you today. Regarding the variance, Division 1.18 outlines standards for residential development in a non-residential zoning district. One of those requirements is related to setback. A minimum of a 20-foot setback is required when adjacent to a residential zoning district, with an additional 10 feet for each story above 1 story. This would result, in this case, in a required 30-foot setback along the southeastern property line adjacent to John Mankins Park. However, the applicant has requested a variance to allow for a 10-foot setback only adjacent to the park. Setbacks along the other portion of those southeastern property line would be consistent with the required 30-foot setback. So they would be 30 feet from any neighboring residential parcels. Staff had recommended approval of the variance, noting that the intent of the required setback is to protect adjacent residential uses. However, the actual adjacent use in this case is a park. Staff found the proposed setback of 10 feet to be consistent with the setback of other single-family residences constructed adjacent to the park. And we also recommended a condition of approval for the variance, requiring a deed restriction to be recorded at the time of the final map in order to disclose the project's proximity to the park. Again, at the July 28th Planning Commission meeting, a motion to approve the variance did not pass as a result of a 3-1 or 3-3 vote with 1 absent. The commissioners that voted no indicated that they felt the setback could be met with the elimination of 4 units, that 10 feet was simply too close to the park, that the overall project is not in keeping with the community, and that the request did not meet the criteria for a variance. The tie vote resulted in an action to not approve the variance. On August 2nd, the applicant submitted an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision. The letter of appeal, which is included in your packet, notes that existing single-family residences adjacent to the park site are located with similar 10-foot setback. Additionally, the area where this development is proposed to be located is adjacent to the area of the park that is included and designed to be a buffer. And finally, the letter points out that John Mankins Park is zoned single-family 12, but if one of the public zonings had been applied to the park, we wouldn't be here today discussing a variance or an appeal of a variance. After hearing from the public, staff, and the applicant, the board may affirm, modify, or reverse the decision of the Planning Commission as it relates to the variance. And finally, on July 28th, the Planning Commission voted 5-1 with 1 absent to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of the tentative subdivision map based on the ability to make the findings included in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval which are included in my August 5th memo to the board. As a result of the denial of the variance, this included a condition, which is condition 27, requiring the setback to be met along the common property line with the park. I'll also note that if the board votes to uphold the Planning Commission's decision and deny the variance, condition 26B should be removed from the conditions of approval. However, if the board votes to reverse the decision of the Planning Commission and approve the variance, condition 27 should be removed from the conditions of approval. We did receive comments from members of the public prior to the Planning Commission meeting, which are included in your packet. An additional public comment was received prior to today's meeting, and that has been provided to you as late material. I'm available for questions. Mark Turner is here, as well as Chris Baker. And they may wish to address the board. Stephen Pote with Development Engineering is here and has a few comments to address some of the public comments.
Mr. Pote, did you want to, I would like it if you can, if it's all right with the rest of the board, I would like to address the public comments today, either to clear up any inaccuracies in the thoughts or confirm what they've said and why or why not. So first one, if anybody can answer and work on, I heard that one of the public indicated that we should not rezone this. So I need to be clear on the zoning. It is not a rezoning. This is an allowed use, so there was no rezoning. I just, and if you can confirm that for me, because it's important that the public understand this is not a rezoning request. This project was allowable with the conditions. Is that, I just like that.
Heather
stated on
Ferris
there.
for the record. That is correct, Mayor. This was a special use permit request. The neighborhood business zoning district allows for residential uses subject to first obtaining a special use permit. At the Planning Commission meeting, they did obtain approval of that special use permit.
And to the highest density, right? That particular zoning allows.
There is no
densities.
density tied to
Right.
it. The density is actually set with the special use permit.
Okay, I just need to,
Yes.
I just want the public's questions to be answered. It's only right.
Can I comment to that, Mayor? It's, the master plan has it as high-density residential as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
It is aligned. I think I would like if someone would address, what I'm doing is just taking the public comment. I'm sure each of us did this. We wrote the notes down during the public comment. We take it very seriously. I know everyone's not always happy with results, but I do want you to know we do listen, you do have a voice, and we do walk through the processes to make sure that the code is adhered to, and that if you bring up a subject that has not been addressed, then we're going to ask the applicant to address those areas or staff as to how does this meet. So the traffic flow study being 1993, can you answer to the traffic for this particular project and what was utilized to make the decision that further enhancements to the road or something were not necessary, or why you could use it? Mr. Pote, you're going to answer the traffic?
Thank you, Mayor Bagwell. Stephen Pote for the record. So this project did not submit a traffic impact study. As the board knows, there are triggers for when a traffic impact study is required, which are 80 peak hours and 500 trips per day. And there are also other measures that staff can use, including safety concerns. In this case, we looked at the city's transportation model, which was showing a 0.7 capacity ratio for this area, which loosely equates to a level of service C for local intersections. So no red flags there. Also, as many of the public mentioned, there's a 1993 traffic study. That is not the last traffic study we've received. There's been many subdivisions and commercial developments in this area since then, which have submitted traffic impact studies because they did trigger that requirement. And so staff is aware of the intersections in the area from those studies as well.
Mr. Supervisor
Yeah,
Giomi,
thank
you have
you.
a question on the traffic study?
Stephen, in terms of the traffic study, and one of the things that we did a number of years ago was authorize the addition of a traffic engineer. So was our city traffic engineer, did he look at the submitted information
He did, yes.
and evaluated it for either accuracy or I mean, he could have thrown a red flag if there were concerns that it was slanted, in other words, correct?
Yes.
And that didn't happen.
And that is another comment that somebody brought up. They took issue with the accuracy of the number of trips being generated. And just so the board is aware, that comes from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They perform studies to determine what an accurate measure of the number of trips generated by different types of projects should be.
And we as the board specifically agreed to add a traffic engineer for, among other reasons, to be able to evaluate the validity of the reports that we receive from developers so that we're not relying on potentially a slanted, in this case, that wasn't the case, but potentially a slanted traffic study that we have a traffic engineer that can verify the accuracy of that. So, thank you.
Supervisor Schutte, you had a question in the traffic area?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And this is a question I had prepared, and you've answered some of it, so I don't want to be redundant, but I think it's important to ask. So requests for or questions about the need for a comprehensive traffic study continue to be shared. What would this kind of study entail, and what are the anticipated findings if traffic studies were carried out? With the concern about continued growth in Carson City, can you give a brief overview of what is taken into consideration when these concerns arise, and address if cumulative impacts are taken into consideration? And I know you spoke to that just a minute ago, but if you could, because there is a concern, not just in Silver Oak, but also the East Nye Lane. And so I think it's important to kind of speak to that. So thank you.
You're welcome. So yes, on cumulative impacts, each successive traffic impact study has to look at both the existing traffic and also projects that are entitled. And then if this were to have a traffic impact study, typically I would defer to that transportation engineer that we hired. He's an expert in that, and he has his finger on the pulse of which intersections may be of concern, what infrastructure needs a closer look. And so we would design the scope based on that knowledge.
So it's safe to say that we're not blindly discounting traffic concerns, that they are in effect being considered cumulatively, not just in isolation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, the next, certainly. I
I'm
was
sorry.
gonna go ahead.
Supervisor White. Was College Parkway originally going to be a right-in, right-out? Is that new or a change from?
Are you referring to the entrance to the subdivision on College?
Well, I guess my question was that originally planned to be an emergency-only egress, or has it always been planned to be a right-in, right-out?
So there was a conceptual map, and just based on my memory, I think the original submittal did have an emergency entrance there, and our development standards require any subdivision, except for a single cul-de-sac subdivision, to have 2 points of access, full points of access. So that's why that got turned into a right-in, right-out.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, do you have a way to conjure up what the actual traffic load would be for each access point. I didn't see that in any of the documentation of where do you think the cars might go? Half of them out Oak Ridge, half out College? Is there any way to try to figure that out? Or you just come up with a total number of trips?
There is. So that's an important part of any traffic impact study. They do a trip distribution, which is they look at the surrounding zoning and look at what percentage of trips they think are going south, east, west, and north to different key intersections.
So again, I didn't see any of that in the paperwork. Do we have an idea what those numbers will be for each of these access points?
We don't have a traffic impact study for this specific project, but there are other projects nearby that we could look at that would give us an idea of roughly what that would look like.
Well, other projects wouldn't speak specifically to these two access points for this development.
Correct.
So today, we don't have that answer?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question that there was some public thought on, and I'm not sure I'm tracking with it, but I do want it on the record because I'm not reading the same thing that the person testified on. They said that page 535 of our packet indicated engineering that the capacity of our sewer, that we were at capacity. So can you just please speak to, because what I'm reading here on page 533 and 534 is that the sewer has capacity, but please speak to that because I want to, again, it's important that, do we have the sewer capacity for this project to be served?
Yes. So capacity for sewer analysis is determined on the depth of flow in the pipe over the diameter, and there's a factor of safety built in there. So full isn't an actual full pipe. Full is when you get to 50% or 75%, depending on the size of the pipe. In this case, I can't remember if it's before or after this subdivision. It will be above that capacity threshold. And typically with some large sewer improvements, water improvements, there can be situations where it would just kill any project in the area to require them to upgrade that entire thing. In this case, the area is an area on College Parkway that is already on our CIP list. And so staff thought it appropriate to require a pro rata share for the development. And how that's calculated is you look at the demand imposed by the subdivision and the cost of the improvements, and then you look at what additional capacity would be added by the project. And so that determines their percentage of the cost.
So to be clear on the record, the sewer system is being upsized to be able to handle this project and everything else in that area. And this developer is paying a proportionate share of the impact of their development to the upsizing
That's
of
correct.
this. I just, again, want to be clear that we're not going to impact the sewer of the existing users, because that's a valid point, right? Everyone wants to make sure their toilets will flush, et cetera, et cetera. So there is no issue on this project because it's being upsized?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want it on the record to see. I think I also heard that can you talk to me about the snow plows, fire trucks, and waste management vehicles on the ability to access this development?
So on that, there's a few points. One is that these are proposed to be privately owned and operated streets, owned and maintained, I should say. They are meeting our minimum standard for roadway width and the minimum turnaround diameter, which is for fire trucks. So that gives, I believe, sufficient room to turn around. And then also staff, with any commercial or subdivision project, we require that the developer coordinate with waste management to ensure that waste management is satisfied with how they're laying out either dumpsters or if it's individual receptacles, if they're satisfied how that's laid out.
Okay, so, because again, I think it's important that the public understands we don't bypass any of these components. Let's see. The Sierra Place residents cutting out their walking arena or something with the sidewalk. There is no conditions, no requirements. I understand the point, but there is nothing that we do to any project in our community that deals with, other than it has to be a good sidewalk in front of the, can you talk to that? Because I heard that as a public comment.
Yes, so they will be required to install ADA compliant curb ramps, which is very typical. And those standards have been getting more stringent as years pass. So, I mean, even with relatively new curb ramps, a lot of times with projects, we'll have them come in and remove and replace those. So that's the industry standard, and there's also existing crosswalks at the major intersections.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to speak to because it's not within, I believe, our jurisdiction, but there was the bullying of neighbors, or let me say it differently, false communication. There was some issues out there. And if Ms. Ferris can just speak to the required communications and that those were accurate?
So noticing was done prior to the Planning Commission, a minimum of 10 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. We notified all residents within 600 feet pursuant to city municipal code as well as state law. And then prior to this meeting, notices were required to go out specifically for the appeal of the variance. So the same folks that received a notice for the Planning Commission meeting received another notice, a minimum of 10 days prior.
So appropriate or legal noticing did occur?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor White?
Thank you. It seems to me several years ago, as a policy standard, did not the city agree to send these legal notices out over and above the NRS up to the 600 feet? I mean, it seems like it used to be
300 and we went to
300 or
6.
250 feet, but the city on its own has set a policy of 600 feet, far above the legal standard. Is that not correct?
That's correct. That's a good note, just for the public. What he's indicating is we exceed the state rules because we wanted to notice more people in the neighborhood. So that's a good point. Okay, I think unless somebody else has something we have addressed on the record, the public comments. Supervisor Giomi, was there something else that I missed? Thank you.
Were you done, Supervisor White? Were you done?
Yes.
No, I have another.
A new one.
thing I
He
want
hit
to-
it again.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I wasn't interrupting you is all I was saying.
I did have, no, go ahead. I'll go after you. We're good. We got it.
Talk to me a little bit about, I'll ask staff, and then when the applicant comes up, I can ask him how he's planning to address this. But we've heard a lot of concerns about parking, and I don't really find those concerns without merit. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Oak Ridge Drive, and particularly that portion of Oak Ridge Drive from the park northward. It is currently not marked for no parking. Was there any consideration given by us to label that no parking to help alleviate potentially the issue of either people who are visiting that park or, overflow from this, should this be approved, to sort of prevent that from clogging up? I'd be interested to hear what you thought about that. Or what our well, Lucia's not here, but.
I would like to have the transportation manager, their opinion on that, because there is existing streets that don't meet today's standards that have parking.
Say that again?
So there are existing streets around the city that might not necessarily meet today's standards where parking is historically allowed. So there's a little more that goes into that decision
So it would be
than does it meet
inconsistent
today's.
potentially to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we can get her on the phone, not right this second, but, oh, well,
Oh, he's
we
here.
have, I didn't see him back there, so.
He thought he was incognito.
Darren Schultz, Public Works Director, for the record. I am shrinking, so I appreciate that comment that you couldn't see me. Lucia is not available this week, so yeah, we didn't specifically look at that as part of this project of what would happen there to allow parking or to put no parking signs there. It's something that we could look at and address and come back and provide an
I mean, the
update.
only reason I ask is I don't live in this neighborhood, but my granddaughter and I frequent that park. And there are often times when I will park, well, honestly, I'll park in the Kmart parking lot, which is private property, and I don't really have any right to do that. But and we'll walk over because, as people have said, the park is often quite full. So I kind of wondered about that, and I guess we'll let the applicant speak to that when he comes up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. I'd like to kind of revisit the setback for just a second. Kind of following up on my question earlier this week. So looking at this map, it appears that units 46, 47, 48, and 52 will maintain a 30-foot distance between those two residences there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else. Any other questions or discussion out there for anything? Would the applicant please come forward? Thank you. Stephen, can you let the applicant come? Thank you. If you'd state your names for the records, please.
Madam Mayor, Supervisors, Chris Baker with Manhart Consulting here on behalf of the applicant. Good morning.
And Supervisors and Mayor, Mark Turner, applicant, for the record. Thank you for your time this morning.
Okay, so what I'd like to start with, because unless I'm missing my uptick on this, we'd like to talk about the parking. And so if you could just talk about how it's going to work, what the standards are, why you're doing what you're doing, and how you're going to manage it. I think that would be helpful to all of us.
Again, thank you, Mark Turner, for the record. Mr. Baker has a fairly comprehensive PowerPoint presentation that he would like to go through. I think at the Planning Commission, we somehow just didn't get the chance to bring all this information up and go through this and take this through chapter and verse, so it is clearly understood. So I'm going to let Chris go through this. There's some slides that are available on the screens here. And if we need to stop as we go through there and discuss some of those things, we can do that. And this may spark some questions as well. So hopefully by the time we're through with this, we've touched on each one of these important issues and answered any questions you have in a sufficient manner.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baker?
Perfect. Madam Mayor, Chris Baker again for the record. So what you're looking at now, again, and I'd like to thank Heather for doing a very comprehensive overview of the project itself. We have some specific slides in the PowerPoint. I don't feel like I need to go through the whole thing, but since parking is kind of the topic of now, this specific slide kind of breaks down demand requirements and then kind of expands a little bit on kind of where our 139 stalls are. So again, 139 parking stalls are provided. Those are comprised of 104 garage stalls, 35 guest stalls, which does exceed Carson City's requirement. The table that you're looking at is important because it kind of puts Carson City's requirement in perspective. Again, you heard Mr. Pote speak of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They do a trip generation tables, which are for traffic studies. They also do parking demand studies. In this case, this is based off of Land Use 230, which is condominium, townhomes, suburban. And what you see there is ITE's peak average, right? So that is, if you took all of the studies that they've done, that's kind of the average. And they're stating that 1.38 stalls are required per unit. So if you multiply that out, according to ITE's average data, we would need 72 stalls. More importantly, ITE's 85% peak, which is typically what we're required to design to, is 1.52 stalls. So again, if you multiply that out, you're at 80 stalls. Again, and I say that just for context. So Carson City's requirement is actually 2.5. Multiplied out, 130. And then there on the bottom is what the project is proposing. So 2.67 stalls per unit, 9 over Carson City's code. And to really put that in perspective, it's almost double what the ITE average. So the nationwide average for a project of this use and size, we're almost double the stalls. And again, as far as control of those stalls, they are private streets, proposed to be private streets. There will be CC&Rs, there will be an HOA or Property Owners Association. So unlike something that is out for public enforcement, the burden will not fall on Carson City. You know, there will be a separate HOA and a board to control and enforce if inevitably people do wrong stuff, right? But there is somebody there, and the small nature of this development, there's going to be a lot of eyes. So those problems will be solved quickly if they do arise.
So for clarity's sakes, will you talk to me about, one, this is a separate HOA from the current HOA at Silver Oak. So the current residents of Silver Oak will not be responsible. None of this can fall on or revert to their requirement for them to take care of it. So I think I heard someone else say they were worried that if this one failed, it would fall on them.
Ms. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak again. Yes, this particular development would have its own property owners association. And the primary reason for that is that the needs of this area are going to differ from the needs of the greater Silver Oak area. The greater Silver Oak area has city streets and it has city utilities. This is going to have private streets. Reconciling the fee structure between the Silver Oak Homeowners Association and the Property Owners Association for this particular development is just not a doable task, and it's not a good use of time or effort. So the Property Owners Association for this particular subdivision will be maintaining the utility aspects that are private as well as the roadway aspects that are private. Just a few more comments with regards to parking and concerns about parking. I believe that my partners and I are amenable to no parking being posted along Oak Ridge Drive if it were determined by Public Works that were legal and safe to do. We have no problem with that. As Chris alluded to, we have a number of parking stalls in here. We're 9 over the code. And so, we do have to utilize the code as our North Star when we're designing anything. If the value of the code is useless and, ideas about parking are strictly going to be subjective, then why go through all of this? So we have to start with standards, and then we have to look at standards, and then we have to look at the situation, the site, and then make a decision as to how much more of the site we're going to devote to parking to go above and beyond the standard. If the standard doesn't mean anything, then why have it? And we hope it means something. There's also been some concern about vehicle size and this particular development. The garages are 20 by 20. While I was waiting outside earlier, I just got online and I just checked a couple different vehicle lanes just to give you some context about certain vehicle sizes. Chris drives a Toyota Tundra pickup, and it's, I think, 225 inches. We have about 240 inches of space. You can get a Toyota Tundra pickup in this garage. A Toyota Highlander is 16.6 feet in length, and the garage depth is 20 feet. Now, to me, a Toyota Highlander is a 3-seat sport utility vehicle. It's a large vehicle and can easily be accommodated in a 20 by 20 garage. I do have to say that if you are a person who is driving a F-450 four-door pickup truck dually, this is probably not the type of residential situation you're going to be looking for. And not everybody drives those types of vehicles. But a 20-foot garage can house a certain large full-size pickup. Can it house a 8-foot bed, four-door pickup? No, it can't. And if you have such a vehicle, then this is probably not the correct housing product for you. This is why we have different categories of housing products in a city such as ours. There are housing products that are appropriate for some folks and not appropriate for others. And so we're tailoring this as not a one-size-fits-all type of housing that meets everyone's needs. We're looking at a certain segment of the market to target with that. If you have any questions or further comments about that, I'm happy to continue the discussion as need be.
But just on the record, you will contain the parking within your own development.
Absolutely. On the
I
record.
want that on
the
record.
record, we will control the parking within our development. We don't believe that's a difficult task. We believe that through the restrictions that will be filed on this property, that we will have the ability to enforce those.
I just need to make sure. I'd like to talk a little bit, go ahead, Supervisor White.
I'm just curious what that enforcement mechanism is for the parking.
Through the CCNRs, and if you're familiar with CCNR processes, the restrictions are tied to your property, and then you are beholden to those restrictions. We will have the ability through the association to level penalties if need be, and also tow vehicles if they're not in compliance with the rules and regulations. I don't know if you live in a neighborhood that has restrictions. You may or may not.
He doesn't.
No.
Okay.
But there are
But
Fifth Street, Quill Ranch, all of them
and
have
I'm sure
restrictions.
Dan
Yeah.
sees his share of CCNRs come through his office. It's part of his job as the DA to look at these documents and to approve them before final maps are approved for these types of subdivisions to make sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So yes, we will have a mechanism for enforcement, and we plan to enforce it. This development is, we're attempting to showcase this as a different form of housing that you really haven't seen too much of in Carson City. However, Chris can tell you that it's all over northern Nevada and throughout the western United States. This is not a rare type of housing. It's ubiquitous now. It's everywhere. This is how housing is built nowadays, and it has a lot to do with the cost to create housing, and those costs being driven primarily by regulatory aspects and code compliance. This is where we've been pushed to create product that complies with the codes and regulations, and also has an element of financial feasibility associated with it.
May I ask
Before you
DA's
go on,
ahead.
did I adequately answer your question, Supervisor White?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
May I just, for a point of clarity, I know that we do have the district attorney's office have a review type thing on the CCNRs. Since we've actually put this issue on the record, would that be a review point to ensure that the CCNRs addresses the parking? I just want to make sure it's not going to get missed. I completely believe that you'll put it in the CCNRs, but just, right, because you do a review before the map, final map, right, for compliance. Would that be just a compliance check you would do?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'd like to address that question on the record. So just for purposes of clarity, over the years, since I've been with the district attorney's office, I mean, we are, of course, aware, we recognize that CCMC provision that Mark has alluded to on the record. I will say as a matter of record, or as a matter of past practice, however, that we work directly in consultation and coordination with the Community Development Department. And really the role of the district attorney's office at this point in time is for us to be made aware of any particular legal issues that may arise out of the routine review of these CCNRs that are proposed. I mean, frankly, the fact of the matter is that the DA's office, we don't have sufficient resources and personnel and staff for us to review every page and every line of every packet of CCNRs that are associated with the proposed development. We do, however, as I said, for the record, we do coordinate closely with the Community Development Director, and to the extent there are any legal issues that are outside the routine nature of your stereotypical, standard, normal CCNR provisions, we will take a close look at that to make sure that everything's in compliance legally with what's required on either a federal, state, or a local regulatory aspect.
And thank you so much. maybe I can just ask, we have a condition of approval that would fit this, or would we need to modify some language just to ensure that these CCNRs will need to contain the parking?
I think we could modify condition 25. It currently reads,
Condition, we need to get to the same place.
it's page 862,
Condition
correct,
8.
of my packet.
Oh, 862, okay, I got it.
Mine only goes to 857.
We don't go that high, so,
It's the memo that's connected to
Oh, I'm-
14E.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
got it. 62, a condition 25, at the time of recordation of the final map?
Yeah,
Okay.
a private homeowners association or similar entity must be formed to provide maintenance for all common areas, including the private road in perpetuity. We could add something to the effect of the CCNR shall address parking and parking enforcement.
Would you be acceptable to us amending this condition that you have to have a parking enforcement component in your CCNRs?
Yeah, for the record, Mark Turner applicant, again, yes, we would be amenable to that, Ms. Mayor.
I think it's only fair to the residents around there that your HOA will have the responsibility of doing the enforcement, because I think that's, they need to know who has the responsibility and that it will be done. That's,
And if I might add, just one more time for the record, we would also be amenable to posting that portion of Oak Ridge Drive as a no parking zone. That would not bother us at all to see that there. So if it were decided that that was a smart thing to do, and it didn't interfere with, more technical aspects of travel and public works types of things, I think that could also go a long ways towards addressing the concern there.
I agree with that too. I don't know that I
don't
would
wanna
put
put-
it in the condition of approval because it's got to be evaluated by our transportation manager and a determination made if that is in fact proper. But
We can
if
have
it
'em
is
look at
proper
it.
and we have you on the record saying that you would do that, then I think we're good. But I would like that to be looked at because it may be a solution to helping some of those concerns and that park, I hate to discourage people from using a park, but that park gets so much use, and I admittedly use it and don't live in the neighborhood, and you can't restrict people from using a park, but sometimes I think people have to find a different place to park, and that might help relieve some of the burden of the overflow in that park. Anyway, I'd like
Supervisor
to see that.
Giomi, I think if you would hold that item and make a note under item 16, please, that would be wonderful. We can request staff to
Part of the
review
motion.
that. So let's do that, item 16, that would be eligible, where you can request projects, future agenda items. So
I'm-
since
I
that
didn't know what
doesn't fit this,
16
yeah,
you
I
were
just want to,
talking
I
about.
wrote a note, but we can add that under item 16, so that would be wonderful, because I think it's a great idea, too. Okay, anybody, let's talk then
Do we-
specifically.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
So do we want to add a condition that says if the city makes a determination that Oak Ridge Drive is to be no parking, then
do it as
it
an
would
if.
be the responsibility of the applicant to properly sign it to city
I
staff?
have something drafted already.
If determined
Figured
by
you did.
the transportation,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so Heather Ferris again for the record. I just drafted really briefly, the developer shall install no parking signs along Oak Ridge Drive. Should no parking on street be determined to be appropriate by the Public Works Director.
And that would be 28?
Or just more of 25, we'll put all,
It would be
Or
a
new
new
one.
condition. 27 may be removed
Right,
depending
okay, so
on how
somewhere
you
in there.
guys
we would just
vote.
let you renumber
Yeah,
appropriately.
I got it.
Okay, and that's acceptable, and if you're okay with a conditional?
Yes, for the record, Mark Turner, again, that is an acceptable condition.
Okay, I could live with it that way, too. Let's talk then, anybody have anything else on the tentative map? Because then let's talk about the variance. Are you okay with that, Supervisor White?
I just have one kind of a comment, maybe a suggestion to take a look at. One of my concerns with this project is how close to the intersection your driveway is. Is there a possibility you could shift that driveway closer to the park to get a little further away from that intersection, which is where everybody's going to be getting, if they get balled up, that's where they will be balled up. Can you know, I don't spend any time on that street during rush hour traffic, but if the further you could push that driveway away from College Park intersection, I think it would work out for everybody involved.
Supervisor White, to answer your question, I don't think that we're able to do that, and I'm not convinced that actually is going to be a beneficial thing, even if we could. And I'll probably defer to a professional planner here to talk about that a little bit. We do, when we envision traffic moving about this particular development here, as with most cars in Silver Oak, they're generally either heading towards the core of the city and the main roads, which would have the bulk of the traffic exiting onto College Parkway and heading east on College Parkway towards Carson Street, the highway, or the commercial district. And, fewer cars exiting onto Oak Ridge Drive, as there really isn't a whole lot of target destinations that would be accessible out of that. So from a layout standpoint, it would be very difficult to make that change and create twists and turns in there that may not be navigable by emergency vehicles or trash collection vehicles. So I get where you're going, but there's more to it than just that, just from an overall logistical approach to looking at how the site works. Chris, you want to add anything?
Again, Chris Baker, Manhart Consulting for the record. Looking at the design, again, it does meet intersection spacing criteria for that street. Really, if we were able to move it, it would only be, a nominal distance. You're talking maybe 5 or 10 feet. And again, I think it's important to point out where their criteria comes from, right? It's speed of the street, it's level of service, it's sight distance, and it's stacking distance for that right turn. So, adding a few feet isn't really going to provide a benefit. What could provide the benefit is what we were talking about from a line of sight standpoint. It would be, having no parking on that area, and then the opposite is from a traffic management standpoint. It actually would be leaving the parking on the street, right? Because leaving the parking on the street, actually, studies have showed that it slows traffic down. So those are the two concerns, and you have kind of polar opposites for how to really control it. I think those are the depending on your main issue, those would be more beneficial than moving it, 10 feet.
Thank you so much. So if we can go to the variance discussion, please. And so the findings that are needed for a variance, that's 476 of our packets, correct? Where it talks about A, B, C. Those are the findings that are under discussion for the variance.
That's
So just so that I can draw attention to that. So the first issue that we have is because it's zoned, which is where this drew its requirements from, is neighborhood business. It requires, under the current methodology, a 30-foot setback. In our code, we have opportunities all across the city, all across projects, to request variances. But they have to meet, the variance request needs to meet conditions. Am I correct?
That's correct. It needs
So-
to meet the findings.
So if we can concentrate on those 3 required findings, and let's see where we as a board think they meet them or they don't. So if you could walk us through that, please?
Mayor
ahead.
Bagwell, would it be appropriate for me to jump in at this time?
Absolutely, if
and
there's something-
speak
yes.
specifically to the variance?
Yes.
As you know, the variance is an appeal of a denial of the variance from the Planning Commission. And to be specifically clear, there was a tie vote at the Planning Commission, and I've reviewed the effect of the tie vote. At this time, the tie vote is effectively a denial of the variance. And so it's appropriately here before you to decide if the Planning Commission, as on appeal, if the Planning Commission appropriately denied the variance. Another issue is standing to appeal. In this case, the applicant has appealed, so standing is not an issue. Very briefly, addressing a few comments in the staff report. One of the staff had initially recommended before the Planning Commission approval of the variance. The Planning Commission has denied the variance, and now staff is appropriately recommending that this board deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision. The staff also mentioned in the staff report that the intent of the or address the intent of the setback requirement. I simply wanted to make a few comments about that. That impacts this statutory interpretation or interpretation of our ordinances. One of the hallmark rules of statutory interpretation is that words in a statute should always be given their plain meaning unless the language is ambiguous. So in this case, the 20-foot or the 30-foot setback requirement that's what it is. There's really no room for ambiguity on what that setback requirement is. Interpreting it differently, interpreting that specific language differently would, as the applicant mentioned, bring up a dangerous precedent because we wouldn't be setting standards or clear standards for what the applicant or any other developer needs, what they need to meet and what they need to design their developments to. So in this case, the 30-foot setback requirement is what it is. That said, as the mayor mentioned, you do have the variance process, which allows you to make exceptions, not really interpret that requirement differently, but simply make exceptions to that requirement when the findings, when it's appropriate to issue a variance. So, I find, that being said, I'm in somewhat of a strange situation here where I am the counsel for the Planning Commission and must, of course, do my job by advocating that this board uphold the Planning Commission's decision. But of course, at times, staff has recommended approval of the variance, so it's somewhat of a curious position to be in. Now, all of that said, because this is an appeal, you do have a standard of review specifically for the variance issue. My comments here do not necessarily apply to the tentative subdivision map because that is before you and it's your job to approve or deny that in the first instance with the recommendation of the Planning Commission. The decision whether to approve a variance is within the Planning Commission's decision. So the standard of review on an appeal for the Planning Commission is an abuse of discretion. An abuse of discretion is generally deemed a decision that's arbitrary or capricious. An arbitrary decision is a baseless decision, something that's not based on the facts or the evidence. If there is substantial evidence supporting the decision, it's not arbitrary, it's not an abuse of discretion. Substantial evidence is defined as evidence which a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support a conclusion. Other examples of arbitrary decisions are the absence of any apparent grounds for the decision, or, quote, we did it just because we wanted to do it. Or an arbitrary decision would be simply ignoring the law. A capricious decision is a decision based upon a whim or a decision without an apparent motive. The abuse of discretion standard does not involve deciding for yourself how you would have decided it. And in this case, it is ultimately your decision, your decision to decide whether the planning commission's denial of the variance was an abuse of discretion. But I do believe that there is substantial evidence supporting the decision. And the commissioners did put their reasoning the commissioners that voted no did put their reasoning for voting no on the record. And in particular, one of the commissioners noted that he or she did not feel that the request for a variance met the findings required to be made for a variance. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Heather or Mayor Bagwell.
So I would like to go through what the findings are, because the only way we can determine whether or not the decision, obviously, we're in a quandary here because we have a 3-3 vote. So I'm just going to be honest with everyone here. That's no decision. We did not really get one. It's by rule, it becomes a denial, but I didn't have a majority telling me yes or a majority telling me no. So I don't feel like we really got a decision. It's just by rule, no majority occurred, therefore you have to move the project somehow, and it has to come to a final decision. So I think I'm interested in looking at what the conditions of approval and what evidence supports those conditions, either direction. So if one of these that's written here, if the member of the Planning Commission indicated, please tell us where they thought that condition was not met or met. Whatever the comments are, I think it would be helpful to me to understand
The findings.
the findings.
So first of all, none of the planning commissioners that voted no specifically indicated which findings they could not make.
They did not?
They did not specifically indicate. One member indicated that they didn't feel that it met the intent of what a variance was, and therefore they could not make the findings. One member indicated that essentially they didn't feel that the project was right for the area and voted against. Another, if I recall correctly, indicated that 10 feet was just too close. So we didn't have specific which findings could and could not be made.
Supervisor White?
Yeah, just to go a little bit further on that, one member did make a very vague reference that
He didn't believe the findings in general were met, and the other two members made absolutely no reference to the findings themselves. In my mind, what we should be doing is sending this back to the Planning Commission to make them do it right, but I don't think we have that option. So this was pretty much a malfunction in regards to the opinions of the commissioners.
Thank you. Again, I think we're just in a difficult situation, and I think we have options. It's up to you as a group here. Do we want to go through the 3 pieces and determine whether or not we think the evidence was substantially a yes or substantially a no? And determine, because we're going to have our own rational decision for what we did. So maybe I can start with this and see if we can move on. 1, do you believe that the code supports that this project is eligible for a variance? Kind of in keeping, the code itself says it's currently zoned this, it's 30 feet. Does 5A, the reason that we're bringing this as a variance is because the special circumstance applicable to the subject property. Is it because it's actually a park? And a park in our code is normally 10 feet. So is that the special circumstance and evidence that supports the variance request in 5A?
So yes, in staff's opinion, the special circumstance in this particular situation is that a park will not always, but typically is zoned some sort of public zoning. If that were the case here, we wouldn't be here discussing a variance. So the special circumstance in this case is that the location of the surroundings is essentially, it's constricting the property more so than if it was zoned public regional, for example.
Supervisor
Yeah,
Giomi?
Can I just ask why, do we know why that never got rezoned, the park? Why?
I don't, and I think it's probably worth looking at in this general area, just to clean things up when we move forward with the master plan, the annual review of the master plan.
I mean, we undertake fairly routinely
Right.
in that process, so I guess I'm wondering how this, you know, I guess the point should be, again, off this topic, but we probably need to go back and review all our parks to make sure they're all properly zoned.
I would agree.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So maybe we just take these one at a time. So no one on the planning commission indicated that finding 5A could not be met. There was no,
indication specifically as to which finding could or could not be made.
okay. Let's start here then with us as a board. Does anybody have an issue with finding 5A? Do we all agree that we would get past 5A before we go to 5B? Everybody's 5A has been met? Okay. Then if we go on to item 5B, that the granting of the application is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights of the applicant. Can you please explain to us that and how staff felt it was met? And then in general, if there was any comment by the Planning Commission, maybe not specific to 5B, but in general, did they make a comment that would be
So
applicable?
in staff's opinion, again, because this is zoned single-family 12, it does constrain the property somewhat, and it's not consistent with the setbacks for other single-family residential development in the area. They're as close as 10 feet to the park. So in our opinion, the finding can be made because of those issues.
Can I ask the existing park so that I can have a little more clarity to this? On the one end of the park, it is next to residential. Can you please give me the setback to that? It's 10?
It's 10.
In that same
So those-
park? I just
correct.
want to make
Those-
sure that
those-
particular park.
Yes.
Residential is 10 feet.
That's
For
correct.
consistent.
So on the northeast side of the park, I'll see if I have a slide. So I think these are Chris's slides, so those show, and they're all within about 10, 11 feet of the park property.
Okay, does anybody here have a question on whether or not B can be made? Okay, then let's go on to C. The granting of the application will not, under the circumstances of the particular case, adversely affect to a material degree the health and safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood of the subject property and will not materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements to the neighborhood of the subject property. I think whether he likes it or not, he was actually pretty eloquent on this particular from the public. It's difficult to be able to prove that you're going to lose a property value or that it's going to be detrimental to the well-being of your property. And but talk to us on this finding.
So again, we're looking at a setback. What the applicant is proposing is consistent with the other single-family residential uses in the area. You know, I don't believe the existing single-family residential uses are detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare because they're 10 feet from the park. And I don't believe in this case that this would be either.
So our job then is to look to say, can you give me the comment from the planning commissioners that voted no, please? One of them said there was one that just doesn't like it or just doesn't think it fits.
Yeah, so the commissioners who voted no, they indicated, one, that the setback could be met with the elimination of 4 units and that 10 feet was just simply too close. That the overall project is not in keeping with the community. And then finally, the other comment was that the request did not meet the criteria for a variance.
Okay. Can I see a picture, please, of the park itself for the area that will be next to the parcel? I want to specifically see that line. Hopefully you have that.
So this is probably,
Yeah, how about, what I'm trying to ascertain, so just so that you all know, whenever I look at a project, I physically go there myself, and I stand there and I try to, pretend the actual project is built so that I can walk the parcel. And so what I'm trying to get to is, if I recall, there is a skateboard component. Oh, thank you. And there's like a tennis courts to the end. And then there's quite a bit of a buffer zone from the park activity to there's a fence. So I don't know whether the applicant, what is that distance from where the children and the people are playing to the fence? And it's kind of like I don't want to say it was a ditch, but maybe I'm wrong. It's not a ditch, but thickets or whatever you want to call. So maybe if you can speak to the side that we're specifically asking for the variance, if you can tell me the park activities, the distances, can you speak to that, please?
an aerial.
Because I think it will help.
I don't know if I'm connected here.
Ms. Mayor, I can get started on answering that question for you.
I think I have another one that's a little closer.
And then I'll also ask Mr. Baker to comment on this too, as someone who has studied this closely. When I went out to hire a landscape architect to build this park, at the time that he began to design this park, he was well aware of the existence of the neighborhood business zoning area, which is the proposed location for this development. Now, as you all are probably keenly aware at this point, neighborhood business is one of the most liberal zoning designations that exists in the Carson City zoning code. And you can correct me if I misspeak here on any of this, Chris, that under the neighborhood business zoning designation, the immediately allowed uses, not SUP allowed uses, but the immediately allowed uses are commercial in nature. And I believe that the setback that's required on a neighborhood business zoning to residential is what?
20 plus 10 feet per story.
Yeah, so I think where Mark's going here is the underlying development standards for neighborhood business actually are 0 setbacks across the board. So again, and I think the whole root of the variance is very important to get to. If the park was zoned what the actual use and intended use of the property was, we would not be having this discussion. Furthermore, I think it's important to point out the properties, the existing residential adjacent to the current park site that are 10 feet, they actually have an underlying zoning requirement of a 20-foot setback. But they didn't go through the variance process to achieve the 10. They went through the PUD process to achieve the 10. So those findings at that meeting needed to be made also, just like the findings you are having to make, not for variance though, but for a reduction in setback. So whether or not there was, any unintended consequences, in my opinion, those findings have actually already been made by the approval of the reduction of the setback on the other side of the park. So I think that might shed a little bit of light on it.
You mean for consistency?
Consistency, correct.
But can you tell me about I'm trying to determine whether us granting this would cause an injury either to the park use. That's what I'm trying to get to. And
Certainly.
I believe, based on just my own personal, what I saw there, you're not going to have kids.
No, that
What's
that
going to
is
happen to that fence?
that
Maybe I need some
particular.
more understanding.
Well, yeah, let me take these, just bite these off one at a time here. Just to kind of complete the discussion about that flank of the park. I mean, obviously, the park is a square. It has four sides to it. The side exactly opposite of this subject side here has existing residences that are at 10 feet setback distance from the fence that divides the park and the residences to the residential structure. Now, that area of the park is a full play area of the park. It's fully accessible. The area of the park on the opposite side that we're talking about was designed to have an additional buffer area inside of that, knowing that it was immediately adjacent to a commercially zoned piece of property that was next door. So, as you alluded to earlier, if you walked along that line, you're walking near the structure that covers the portable toilet units that are there in season. The irrigation, heavy-duty irrigation equipment is also stored there. And then there is a large area of heavy cobble that is difficult to walk on and was specified on purpose to make this an area of the park that was less attractive to be in because of its proximity to the commercial zoning district next door. So this park already has a built-in buffer there that was put there on purpose by the landscape architect to provide additional shielding from the play areas, the tips, the corner tip of the tennis court, the corner tip of the basketball court, and then a portion of the skate park. Now, if you look at the exhibit there, you can also see the landscape architect selected a number of large growing trees to also create a visual barrier between the park and this site. So a lot of thought went into this flank of the park and how it would interact with what is a commercial zoning district and neighborhood business, and how the design of the park would also incorporate elements that provided additional shielding between the users of the park and the commercial zoning district. Now, what we're talking about is not a convenience store or other one of the myriad of uses that is approved under the neighborhood business zoning district. This is a residential area. It's a different form of use than was originally intended for this site, which was intended to be commercial, but now is proposed to be residential. And if you have any further questions, or if I was unclear on that, please let me know, and I'll be happy to fill in the blanks.
Does any member have any additional questions? I don't see any. How about just now in general, any, because we're going to take up the variance discussion first. Any further questions on the variance request? Okay, so our options, we can deny the appeal, or we can uphold the appeal, or we can modify with a different condition. But who wants to take a stab at it? Don't all raise your hands at once. If we just need to have a general discussion, we can just talk with one another. Yeah, Ms. Schutte?
You know, reading the letters, reading the concerns, watching the planning commission meeting, walking the property, looking at the pictures, and really keeping in mind the spirit of the variance and the request of the variance and the reasoning behind having, whether it's 10 feet or 30 feet. I think the fact that, and it's pointed out in the requirements, you know, this is next to a park, but there is that built-in buffer zone that I think provides for the spirit of the addition, you know, why there's a desire for additional footage, space between the park and the complex, but that additional space is really kind of met through the trees and the rocks and the pathway, that buffer zone. With all things being said, I think it's appropriate, even though it isn't popular, and I don't say this lightly because it is such a tough decision, and I so appreciate the spirit of the neighborhood, but I think with the zoning and the master plan and the fact that this is a transitional area, I think it's appropriate to support the appeal and have the 10-foot, allow for 10 feet versus 30.
So your opinion is to grant the appeal, not deny it. Supervisor Jones?
Well, I agree with Supervisor Schutte. I think we've already proven to be consistent. 10 feet isn't out of the question. We also have a buffer that we've discussed, which gives more credence to what we're asking. I want to stress, though, I don't want to criticize the Planning Commission. These people are all volunteers, and I appreciate their efforts and appreciate their comments and their decisions. And I just want them to know I still support them, even though I don't agree with them in this matter.
Okay. Does anybody else want to comment or want to make a motion?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the Planning Commission does do a lot of hard work. And we shouldn't criticize them. However, we're looking at a malfunction of several things. As it's been stated, if the park was properly zoned, we wouldn't even be here today. I feel like the legal aspect of what we're doing today, what we're reviewing today, really has been met according to all of the legal standings. But I will say that this project does stray substantially from what Silver Oak was sold to be. Is it legal to do that? Apparently it is. But I would also say to the developer, what I heard from a number of the people complaining about this particular project is you started off with, if you don't like this, I'll go to 0 lot lines and commercial stuff you really won't like. That doesn't help your case at all. That really doesn't create a situation where people want to work with and negotiate, if you will, and come up with a project that everybody can live with. This really puts us in a corner with the way people view what's going on in their neighborhood. And it's, for me, I can tell you these narrow streets, short driveways is not the way people want to live. People are living that way out of default, in my opinion. I have been in neighborhoods that, especially down in Las Vegas, where I have friends that live down there. Some of those, as you said, are even tighter and smaller than what you're producing. So I think we have to repeal what the Planning Commission did and grant this appeal.
Supervisor Giommi, you're ready to.
Yeah, I mean, I think Supervisor White makes a few good points. I mean, first, the Planning Commission, I don't, we kind of beat them up today, and the decision to have this park not zoned properly is not theirs. Ultimately, it's ours at the end of the day. and other staff, so I can't fault them for that. On the whole, would we all love to have this land stay vacant? I think every piece of land that's vacant in Carson, everyone who lives near it would love for it to be vacant in perpetuity. In this case, we have a parcel that is zoned for high-density residential. The master plan has it as high-density residential. The underlying zoning is allowable for high-density residential. So really, the only question is the variance on the setback. In fact, these homes will be further away from the majority activity in that park than the homes that are on the south side. So I do find that that's the case. Beyond that, I think a lot of people, and to be fair to those of you in the audience, this is my ward. As I said, I use that park. I've talked to a lot of people there. The general consensus from the people I've spoken to is apathy. They don't care one way or the other what's built there. I have heard from people who live directly adjacent to this parcel directly, and I have a good friend that lives on the other side of that park, and they are very much in support of this project because they feel like it is a better use than what could be there. And I'm not saying that in a threatening manner, and I hear what you're saying in terms of the perception that the comments made even by the property owner were threatening in nature, and to your point, I listened to those, and it didn't come across to me that way. I understand I'm looking at it differently than you are. So, all in all, we've got higher density residential just to the east of this. This would be a step down in density from the apartments. And in my mind, I think it's a good use of the transition. Would I prefer it be a little less dense? Yeah, but again, what my preference is and what is legal are not exactly the same thing. So I am in agreement with the rest of the board that I'm finding that we should overturn the Planning Commission's decision on the variance.
So just because I think it's only fair, we all have to put our comments on the record. I look at everything, ignoring both sides, right? For me, everything is about what the rules of the game are. That's it. I'm blind to who the developer is. And I know that there was a lot of comments on the letters that came in being maybe from people that weren't direct property owners or might have had interests. I solely read letters for content, for what is missing pursuant to the rules. That's what I'm doing when I read all public comment for all issues. I'm looking for a salient point that staff missed or that there is a law or a code component. So I am not swayed by the name on the letter. I just want to let you know, certainly all of this board recognizes that some of the individuals that wrote the letters have their own vested interests, potentially, or maybe not. I don't know who the realtors of record are gonna, I don't have any idea who's gonna do those parts, but I do understand the concern of the residents thinking they're trying to stack the deck with positive comments about the project. I do want you to know we're not naive to that. The job that I have today is to determine whether or not the Planning Commission erred in its decision, whether or not they had evidence to support their decision. So what I'm left with and want to put on the record today is based on the comments that were given by the members of the Planning Commission. They had no evidence to support not approving the variance request. I'm sorry, and I wish that they did, but they did not. They stated in general terms. They did not say we can't make finding 5A for this reason or 5B or 5C. And that leaves me, as my job is to determine whether or not I thought the Planning Commission erred and had evidence. I find that they erred because they stated no evidence for the record for me to rely upon. And therefore, I agree with the rest of the members that we should grant the appeal and overturn the Planning Commission. And in fairness to the Planning Commission, I agree with you. If they'd had their missing member, we also might not have been here. We only had 6, so they couldn't come to a final decision to help us, which we're used to having final decisions. So with that, does somebody want to make a motion? Oh, you have another comment, Supervisor Jones?
This townhome project isn't new. I remember Garth telling me many years ago that he was planning an upscale townhouse, and I think it was about the time that the recession hit or something, and he put it on hold. But this isn't new. This was always been a part of Silver Oak, a high-end townhome project. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that.
Okay. We're ready for a motion on 14D. Who wants to take a stab at it? Do you want me to do it? All right, I'll do it. You ready? Okay.
I move to deny the appeal.
Nope, that's not.
14D.
Nope, that's exactly the opposite.
Oh, whoop, sorry.
I was going to say, did you want me to give it a shot?
Sure, yes.
Thank you. We'll have a different motion on the next
Move
item
to
to add
approve
all
the
the other
appeal.
parts, right?
Sorry.
I move to grant the applicant's appeal and direct staff to coordinate all necessary preparatory tasks in a manner so as to effectuate the approval of the variance as originally submitted to the Planning Commission.
Yes, thank you.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Just the motion carried. The variance has been granted. I do want to, for the record, for the public, though, that came on something, it's important to me. We are in the process of rewriting all of our codes. And I know that some asked for us to use, for lack of a better word, common sense, or to look at things. I ask each and every one of you to help us, because you're not wrong that things change over time. None of you were wrong in that comment. And what was right in 1993 might not be what's right in 2023. Please help us. Please work on those. Please look through some of these codes. If you think some of these findings are not appropriate findings and we should have other criteria, help us. But I will tell you, I cannot hold someone accountable to a rule that doesn't exist. That's not fair, and that's like telling you I'm going to give you a ticket for going 27 miles an hour when the zone is 30. I can't do that. You know what the rules of the game are, and so I just ask you, though, if we've got something wrong in our code, please help us get it changed. We're working extremely hard on that. So I just thank you all so very much. And
Can
and
I
just
add
ask for
one
that.
comment as well?
Yes.
And I say this a lot at all the meetings, but I really think the dialogue is incredibly important because it really does color, or it influences the direction that how decisions are made. And I think we are all better for the back and forth and for the input because it does have merit and it allows some of the questions to be, and actually all the questions brought up to be addressed. And so while it's stressful, it can be difficult, it is truly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 14E, which has been discussed. So we need to take, though, the changes that we're going to do to the conditions that we did just discuss on the record. So as a summary to that, we were going to add language in number 25. And
That's
Ms.
correct.
Ferris, for the record, please
You want me
state
to review that for
Mhm.
you?
Yes.
Okay, condition 25 would be amended to read, at the time of recordation of the final map, a private homeowners association or similar entity must be formed to provide maintenance for all common areas, including a private road in perpetuity. The CCNRs shall address parking and parking enforcement.
Okay, everybody's okay with that ad? Okay, and then the other issue was we needed to remove item 27. Is that right, based on the action we just
Based on
took?
your previous action, I would recommend removing 27, and then we also discussed another additional
And then
condition.
we would, and again, staff can renumber
Well,
appropriately.
if you
We would
just
also
remove-
be adding.
Remove and replace.
Right, this, and then we'll replace 27 with,
The developer shall install no parking signs along Oak Ridge Drive should no parking on-street be determined to be appropriate by the Public Works Director.
is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay,
At 25, when the CCRs come to be reviewed, you'll see that language similar to what Mr. Turner talked about as far as the enforcement of parking. Is that appropriate to have that kind of language within the CCNRs?
Well, yeah. it-
the
it said
parking enforcement's part of the, yes.
That's a general term of what this condition 25 is. I'm asking, in the CCNRs, what does that language look like that says parking enforcement? Is it going to lay
That's
it
in
down
25's
that he
condition.
can levy fines, that he can tow? Is that language appropriate to be within the CCNRs?
He will develop the penalties in the CCNRs, because otherwise he can't implement if it's not in his CCNRs.
Right. That's
But
what I
staff
wanted
will be
clear.
required before final map, they will verify the condition has been met in the
Right.
CCNR. Staff will do that because it's one of our conditions,
is
correct? Okay, I just want to make sure that that's being addressed. Okay, Supervisor Giomi, are you ready for a motion,
Yeah,
please?
I move to approve the tentative subdivision map as presented with a change on the conditions of approval to number 25 and number 27 as read into the record by Heather Ferris.
Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Jones. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you all very much. We're going to take just a brief recess so we can use the facilities. record. Ms. Warren, are we ready? Okay. Call the Board of Supervisors back to order. We are on agenda item 13A, which is discussion and possible action regarding a determination that Aspen Developers is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Does any member of the board have a question? If not, I'll accept a motion, please. 13A. Supervisor Giomi?
I move toward contract number 213-00033 as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the contract as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carried. Let me catch up. Okay. We're now on to agenda item 14A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the proposed amendment for the Charles Abbott contract. Ms. Sullivan, are you going to take us through this, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. Sitting with me is Corey Coleman, who's our building official from Charles Abbott Associates. Since 2014, Charles Abbott Associates has had a contract to run the building division and the operation of the permit center. What we're considering today is their contract renewal. And as part of this contract renewal, there's no change in scope proposed. Rather, we're looking at the renewal for 3 years, a change in the fee structure, and identifying a percentage payout if the city fails to provide a permit technician. Under our current contract, Charles Abbott provides a building official and the necessary number of employees to perform permit processing services, including permit review and inspections, and other functions associated with the building division. There are currently 5 Charles Abbott Associate employees who work out of 108 East Proctor Street, which is where the Community Development Department is. Those employees are the building official, 2 inspectors, and 2 permit technicians. Currently, Charles Abbott is paid monthly, and it's a sliding scale schedule, and that schedule is identified on page 216 of your packet. In negotiations with Charles Abbott, it requested to receive a larger percentage of the building permit fees. In addition to that request, staff had concern about the sliding scale schedule because with this sliding scale schedule, as more revenue is realized, the percentage that Charles Abbott is paid is less. So there could be, and I'm not saying this has occurred, but there could be incentive to postpone a permit to the following month where the percentage paid would be greater. So to eliminate that potential risk and to address Charles Abbott's concern of a larger percentage of the fees, staff and Charles Abbott has agreed to recommend a flat fee of 60% of the building permit revenues from non-Carson City sponsored projects and 25% of the building permit fees from Carson City projects or sponsored projects be paid to Charles Abbott Associates. So that means if Public Works is going to do, let's just say, a renovation at City Hall, that's a city project, and Charles Abbott would realize 25% of that building permit revenue. Whereas if it was a private office building, they would realize 60% of that building revenue. In looking at a 3-year history, the fee modification would allow Charles Abbott to realize more money each month while taking away any incentive to postpone any permitting. In terms of the permit tech, what the contract says right now is that the city will pay Charles Abbott at a rate agreeable to the city, but that rate's not established. So Charles Abbott has asked that we establish that rate, and we've agreed on a rate of 7% of the building permit revenue. The city, by the way, right now, it has conducted interviews on people who have applied for this permit tech position. It is vacant right now, and we'll do a second round of interviews next week. Corey Coleman, our building official, did participate in the panel for that interview, as did Stephen Pote, who's head of development engineering, and Heather Ferris, our planning manager. The term of the contract. Staff and Charles Abbott have agreed to ask or recommend a 3-year contract. As this board knows, the audit committee has recommended, and the board has agreed, to perform an audit on the building function. And kind of the focus of that audit is the risk to the city in outsourcing the division as opposed to insourcing, which would mean we'd have city employees running the building division versus some type of hybrid. That audit will occur this year. So that's year one. Year two, and possibly end of year one, the board will identify any change in structure that it sees fit or thinks is appropriate. And then the city would need time to implement those changes. Arguably, that could happen in a 2-year period. Having said that, Charles Abbott has requested a long enough contract that their employees understand that they have a job and they can retain their employees. So we felt like 3 years was a reasonable compromise to achieve both interests. I have interviewed both internal and external customers regarding Charles Abbott's activities, if you will, in the city, and have received nothing but positive remarks. So I don't come to you in a silo. I have done the outreach, and I am hearing positive things. And I for one, really enjoy working with Charles Abbott and working with Corey and with his predecessors. They've always put forward a really good building official who has put forward a really good team. So we really appreciate that. Corey is prepared to make a presentation if you would like one. Otherwise, he's okay just answering questions, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Does any member of the board have a question? No? Supervisor Giomi?
Hope on the, relative to the budget, obviously there'll be an increase, and how are we in the enterprise fund, this enterprise fund? Just remind me, because I don't have that stuck in my head from before, so, I mean, will there be an issue with, overburdening the enterprise fund? We're gonna have to supplement?
I understand the question. So right now, the way it works is we have building permit revenues come in, and Charles Abbott receives a percentage of those revenues. So what we're recommending now is, rather than the sliding scale percentage, a flat fee of 60%. There's other employees who are paid out of the building fund as well, and other functions that are paid out of the building fund, including, like, for example, the sewer modeling is paid out of the building fund. So I have not, the idea is the revenue would pay for the function of delivering the service. Right now, I think we're okay, but I'm not sure if Sherry's here, but.
I'm actually on the phone.
Oh, okay, good. Then I think I'll defer to Sherry on the
Great,
rest of that.
Great deferral.
No problem. I looked at the working capital from last year's audit, and we have over $600,000 available in working capital. You can see we did provide a breakdown of the revenues and expenses of that fund for the last 3 years, and then showed what the fees would be at this flat scale. So you can see it kind of breaks even.
Yeah, it's close.
It's pretty
Okay.
close. So we
Well,
have.
I mean, I guess,
the
yeah,
working
considering over
capital
the 3 years, I
to get
think
us
we'll be
through.
okay. And I just wanted to hear that, basically, that over the life of this contract, we should be okay and not
Yes.
not
I
overburden
do
the
not
enterprise
believe we'll
fund.
have to
So,
provide a subsidy.
yep, perfect. Thank you.
Well, and just to follow up with Supervisor Giomi, we wouldn't see a need to increase building permit fees to cover the expense. I think that's what we're trying to ascertain, that we believe we're fine for the 3 years, and therefore we can afford the contract. I mean, that's, in a nutshell, I'm betting that's where he was going. Supervisor White?
Thank you. I'm never opposed to contracting out functions when they can be better done from the outside. But there's always that chance of, at some point, the cost of the contract crosses the benefit of in-house. I believe we're there now. With 5 employees at this particular cost, that's $146,300 a year per employee. I think when this audit is performed, I think we need to look pretty seriously at what the cost of bringing this back in-house is going to be. This is where the cost is going. It's time to start looking inward again.
Madam Mayor, if I may offer just one clarification, and I entirely agree with you that the audit's appropriate. And in fact, I spoke with the auditors and because I'm concerned when you outsource to a single provider, you need to kind of check and see how you're doing against the market, against some type of hybrid or in-house. Having said that, Charles Abbott has 5 employees who sit within our building. They have a team of employees outside our building. So for example, you'll notice when I listed who works within our building, I didn't list any plans examiners. When the plans come in, Charles Abbott is sending those to plans examiners who do not sit within our building. So there is a team of Charles Abbott employees who are supporting Carson City, but they don't sit with us inside the building. So I just want to make that clear to the board, but I 100% agree with you that we do need to do this audit, and the board has already agreed to that.
So what I read in the packet was those folks that are not within a Carson City building are used during times of high traffic when they need some extra help, is kind of the way I read that. So
That
how
would-
often does that actually take place?
That would be the case in the case of inspections, which I think we've been keeping up with inspections with a 1-day turnaround. We did have a plans examiner within the building. When we reached COVID, he started working remotely and he stayed remote. He's our primary plans examiner. And we recently had a situation where it was a structurally challenging project. It didn't go to that particular plans examiner. It went to somebody with expertise in structural engineering. And I'll let Corey speak to the rest of the team that's outside the building.
Thank you, Hope. Mayor and Board of Supervisors, for the record, Corey Coleman, Charles Avenue Associates Building Official. Like it was brought up earlier in the meeting, there's a lot of,
Oh, you just, yeah.
can you hear me now?
There you go.
Thank you. As we heard earlier from the Home Builder Association, there's a lot of benefits. And when Carson City went to this model 3 years ago, it was cutting edge for Nevada. It's quite common throughout the United States. I sit on international code panels and I see I see all the options. I see 100% in-house. I see a little bit of hybrid, and I see where the responsibility falls 100% on the contract employer or on the contract. With that said, there's organizations out there, for instance, SAP, which is Safety Assessment Program. If there was an earthquake to hit Carson City, we have people that are certified in SAP from California, from Nye County. They could be here on a moment's notice to help us bring the city back online. And that's a safety assessment program. In addition, there's ISO, Insurance Service Organization, which rates the insurance rates for the community. So what you guys pay for homeowner insurance has a huge impact on what the fire services are and what the building services are. Charles Abbott carries a Class 2, and the reason we carry Class 2 is you have 200 employees at your fingertips. We have great employees. I can't speak highly enough about my team there in Carson City, but, and the same thing is the city employees. It's a very dynamic operation with the software we have. You do not go into other cities and have a one-stop shop. It's unheard of. It's catching on to these other communities around here. I get calls from other communities like, hey, could we have you come look at us too? Right now, we're focused on Carson City, and we want to make sure it's a good contract with Carson City. But on any given day right now, we have about 10 employees running with it. Oh, Supervisor White, I wish I made 146,000. I'd be right there, but I don't. If you have that, I'll come to the city for that price. Wait,
Benefits.
yeah, and we do, and the thing is the vehicles, they're Charles Abbott vehicles, or we work them out with our employees. But it's a very cutting edge process. I see other building officials in the area struggling. They can't fulfill their inspections the next day. They're out 3 months on plan reviews. We don't have that concern. And with that, I just want to emphasize, we thoroughly enjoy working with the city. Hope's been very good to us. The team has been very good to us. There's not a day that goes by that I can't run up to engineering and say, hey, I need this done today. And they help us out. There's not a day that they can't come down to the building department and say, hey, we need this done today. but it's a dynamic operation.
Do you have any further questions? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor Shute?
I move to approve the amendment as presented. I want to make sure I get it right this time.
You're on the right item to the right one. Yeah. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item 14B. This is for the private activity bond volume. Ms. Sullivan is on there. Is there someone from rural housing that wanted to do a
Yeah,
presentation?
Michonne Hurst is sitting with
Oh,
me,
there
and
you go.
I'm happy to answer any questions. You have the staff report, and if you don't have questions for me, I'm okay with Michonne going right ahead.
There, no questions. We do this pretty routinely. Go ahead, please identify yourself.
Perfect. For the record, Ms. Shawn Hurst. I'm the Deputy Executive Director with Nevada Rural Housing Authority. So I wanted to provide a program update for this jurisdiction of Carson City. So the Home at Last program was launched by Nevada Rural Housing Authority in 2006, and Carson City has transferred their unused private activity bond cap to our agency since then. And that has enabled 735 new home buyers in just the Carson City jurisdiction to attain affordable mortgages. And that equates to over $141 million in financed mortgages through our program. It also has provided over $4 million in down payment assistance directly to Carson City residents and over $3.2 million in tax savings to Carson City residents since 2006. Just this last year alone, we entered into contract with 89 new residents for mortgages totaling over $720,000. And that's a great feat considering the interesting market that we had this last year. The majority of our loans that we financed through the Home at Last program were below 3.5%. And we also saw loans as low as 2.75%. On top of that, the $721,000 was down payment assistance that was provided this last year, not the mortgages that were financed. So 89 new home buyers, and $721,000 in down payment assistance. Since the Home at Last program launched 15 years ago throughout the state, our program is limited to rural counties in Nevada. We are not allowed to offer the Home at Last program in larger jurisdictions with populations over 150,000 people. Since 2006, our program has financed over $2.1 billion in affordable mortgages for rural Nevadans, over $60 million in down payment assistance, and over $35 million in mortgage credit certificates. And so it's a wonderful program that we are happy to have launched and happy to have Carson City support. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the city has at this moment.
Does any member have a question? Nope. Thank you so much for that update. We really appreciate it. I know how hard you guys are working for the residents of Carson City.
Thank you.
I'll accept a motion. Supervisor White?
I move to adopt resolution number 2021-R-24.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second for approval of resolution number 2021-R-24. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, let's see. We are going to move on to agenda item down at the bottom of the page. Catch it. 14C. C is in Charlie. This is an item for a tentative subdivision map on East Nye Lane to create 61 single-family residential lots on a 17-plus acre that's currently zoned mobile home 12,000. Ms. Ferris?
Thank you, Heather Ferris, for the record. The subject property is located east of Otha Street and west of Debbie Way, between East Nye Lane and College Parkway. The parcel is vacant and approximately 17 acres in size. The property is zoned mobile home 12,000 and is located in the medium-density residential master plan. The applicant proposes to subdivide the parcel to create 61 single-family residential lots with a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet and an average lot size of 8,477 square feet. A total of 0.6 acres of common open space will be provided, and each lot will have private yards in excess of 4,000 square feet. The applicant is seeking to utilize provisions of Municipal Code 1710, which is the common open space development. Common open space developments must comply with the allowable density of a zoning district, but may have flexibility on lot size, lot width, and setbacks. The allowable density in the mobile home 12,000 zoning district is 3.63 units per acre. The proposed density for this development is 3.59 units per acre. The overall design concept is to create lots that range from 8,000 to 11,776 square feet. The subdivision is proposed to be accessed via a looped road with access at 2 points on East Nye and a gated emergency ingress and egress on College Parkway. The internal roadway will include a 50-foot right-of-way with a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the street and on-street parking on one side of the street. A minimum of 2 parking spaces will be provided on-site for each lot. Setbacks will be consistent with the MH12 zoning district minimum setbacks. Of note, all lots will front the internal street system, so the rear setback is the setback that would potentially affect the adjacent developments. So the required rear setback in the mobile home 12 is 20. Therefore, future homes will not be any closer to the adjacent developments than if they were using the base zoning to develop without the common open space provisions. Per the standard conditions for a common open space development, the project must provide for adequate screening and buffering of existing and potential development adjoining the proposed development. For the east, west, and south property lines, this will be a privacy fence or wall, and for the north boundary, a sound wall will be required, consistent with the development to the east of the project site. We did receive public comment prior to the Planning Commission meeting. All that written correspondence has been included in your packet. The concerns cited were traffic, density, necessary road improvements, proximity to the airport, and types of homes proposed. Stephen Pote with Development Engineering is here, and he can address the traffic and road improvement issues. Proximity to the airport, staff did work with the airport in developing conditions which are included as recommended conditions for your consideration. And as you know, the Planning Commission conducts a public hearing and advises the board if the proposed tentative map is consistent with the provisions of Municipal Code and NRS. At their July 28th meeting, the Planning Commission was able to make all findings in the affirmative and recommended approval of the tentative subdivision map, subject to the conditions of approval which are outlined in my August 5th memo. I'm available for questions, and Karen Downs with Manhart Consulting is here on behalf of the applicant, and I'm sure she's available for questions.
Does any member have a question? Supervisor White?
Thank you. As with the earlier project, we've heard several concerns from folks in the neighborhood. I'd like to kind of discuss a few of them here. One is water pressure. Several of the people in that neighborhood told me that they occasionally suffer water pressure issues. So how is that going to be addressed? Is that identified by the city? Where are we at with the water pressure in that neighborhood?
Stephen Pote for the record. I cannot speak to what the exact water pressure is there, how it has fluctuated over the past. I do know there is a minimum water pressure that the city is required to maintain by law, and that we do keep an eye on that. With this project, they will be extending a new water main up through the subdivision, and then that emergency access to the north, the water main will punch through there and connect to a water main up there. Is that, I think, Arrowhead, or is that College? College, okay, sorry about that. So in College, there's a water main, and so that will loop the water main, which provides a redundancy and will improve the water system in that way.
Okay. in regarding to the screening and buffering, now it's been talked about around the outside of the development. What's the fencing going to be on that piece of property that's being surrounded by this project?
So the fencing, just so I understand your question, the fencing on the perimeter of this project site?
No, the fencing on the part that, the map that just came up that says not a part.
So
The house.
The donut
that
hole
is-
essentially?
Yeah, the one that's being surrounded.
Okay. So on all sides, other than the northern portion along College Parkway, it will be privacy fencing
Okay.
or a wall. It's something that we will review at the time they come in with their site plans.
Okay. I know a few of the neighbors there, specifically that property, the donut hole as you referred to it, are concerned what that is going to be. So if you could work with those folks to make sure that we keep them happy. And then condition 29, talking about sidewalks and gutters and half a street reconstruction. Personally, I think reconstructing half of Nye Lane is not in the best interest of anybody, considering that the pavement program master plan will be back in that neighborhood in 2024. Again, speaking with those folks in the donut hole, it would be to their preference, since they are substantially impacted by this, that sidewalks, curbs, and gutters would be installed. And I would ask that we take this rebuilding half of Nye Street or Nye Lane out of Section 29 and encourage the developer to work closely with those folks in regards to driveway placement and configuration, because as you'll notice, that property, that's not your standard neighborhood subdivision deal. And so work with those folks to keep their property fully usable as it is today. And that's all I have.
May I speak to that?
Absolutely.
Stephen Pote again for the record. So I agree that this is not your standard shaped lot, and that is why staff put in the option in that condition to do the either or. As staff, we didn't find it prudent to deviate from what is put in code, which is the half street improvements, but we're more than amiable to limiting it to just the curb gutter and sidewalk option.
Well, and as I read the packet, it appears to be optional. So,
They have to do one or the other.
right.
Mhm.
And so I would like to see it go with mandating sidewalks, curbs and gutters along that stretch. I realize they're a sidewalk to nowhere, but perhaps in 24, when the street is rebuilt, hopefully in 24, the street is rebuilt, then the sidewalks come with the street, right? Okay. Thank you.
So I want to be clear what
Yeah.
you're suggesting. So you're saying that they should only have to do sidewalks, curb and gutter?
Correct.
and not the half-street improvement?
That's correct.
And Stephen, you're saying that the option was for them to do, what were the two options?
So as the condition is currently written, they have the option to do half-street improvements only along their frontage, so just where their parcel touches on those 2 points. Or
So
the
not in front of that donut hole?
Correct, not in front of the donut hole.
Okay.
And then the second option is to do just curb, gutter, and sidewalk along their frontage and the donut hole.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I would agree with that. Were you recognizing me, Madam?
Yes.
I kind of started talking
Yep.
without being recognized, and
You're good.
I humbly apologize.
No problem.
Can we, I just have a couple of questions. I mean, it's not really all that germane, but I'm curious as to why, is there some sort of geographic feature that has that one little hunk of open space to the west side of the east side road it kind of seems nonsensical to me that we would put, and if I had a pointer, I'd point to it, but you see where I'm talking about. I don't understand why there's that little hunk there when it would make much more sense for it to all be on one side. Open space is designed to be open space to be used, and this little piece sitting there doesn't, to me, encourage use. It's across a roadway, it's near another busy roadway, and I don't understand why they're not lined up.
I can speak
Are
to
you,
that.
really quickly, are you speaking to the open space that they're proposing?
I'm talking about this.
That piece? Okay.
Why is that there?
Good morning, I'm Karen Downs with Manhart Consulting for the record. The open space was provided somewhat for, on the intersection spacing and then also as a buffer in there as well.
Your microphone's not on.
So to be clear, you're saying that that's there for the buffer of the entrance road? Just that both sides, so it's not
Or it
right
was a
up
re-
against the other parcel?
Or it was a request of the parcel owner to have a buffer.
We can have, I don't know that it was a request, but it is there as part of a buffer and then also for the spacing of that roadway on the east side.
So that it didn't sort of come halfway into the other road
Correct.
across, okay. Well,
Yeah, correct. And then also I'd add too that the open space that's there is proposed to be maintained by the homeowners association, so it's nothing that would impact
right. Yeah.
Carson City, but
Yeah,
yes.
no, I think we knew that.
Design's always tough.
Right.
Okay.
So it's
I
road
mean-
design and then some buffer.
Okay, I guess I could live with that. It's just, I'm a little concerned that we're touting open space, and to me, that does not seem like usable open space. I don't see anyone getting use or enjoyment out of that open space. And when we're doing a common open space development, to me, we should be maximizing the open space so that it is as usable as possible. So are we saying that putting it all into the bigger portion would not meet a city standard, or would you're strangely silent, so.
So maybe we can even ask, does this project exceed the open space requirements and that little sliver is not needed to meet it? Or did that little sliver mean, was it used to meet it? I
I-
think Supervisor Giomi's on the right. So I guess I'd like to know that, like
Yeah.
you said, wait a minute, that sliver can't be used by the public.
I get that it creates a buffer for the
Right.
homeowner. I
But is
totally
it-
get that.
Do you have more than the needed open space, or do you need that sliver to make it?
Stephen Pote, for the record, I can speak to the engineering aspect of it, and then I think Heather's looking at the amount of open space required. So there's minimum spacing requirements for street intersections, just based on the frontage available. We wouldn't be able to meet that anyway. And the further south, or sorry, it's sideways, further east, you would move that. You start getting issues with the horizontal alignment of the road and a quick S turn in there. So we're trying to get it, yes, away from that street to the south that's coming in.
I get that. So you're saying you want it like this.
Correct.
So you're saying moving it further west would create more problems,
Potentially, yes.
but it isn't a violation of the city's development standards. It's just an opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But can you tell me on the open space?
So with
requirement?
regard to the open space, they would be required to provide 0.49 acres of open space. They're providing, in excess of that, they're providing 0.6 acres of common open space. Then you have your private open space. So with a common open space development, you can have either or. And because their lots are so large, they're providing private open space of approximately 4,000 square feet.
Right, so that space is not needed to be open space.
Correct.
Because they
So
have
I would say that it should be changed on the maps
Labeled
from open
differently on the
space
map.
to buffer or whatever. I don't
Don't
want.
mislabel
Yeah,
it
I
that
mean,
it's open space.
I guess my concern in the way that I hang my hat on common open space developments is that we as a city have decided that we value open space. And to me, that's usable open space, whether it be trails or parks or a place to walk your dog or a place to kick a ball. And to me, labeling that open space is misleading because it's not. There's no one in their right mind who's going to go over there and play So, or recreate. So for me, that is kind of an issue. So if we can relabel it, I'd be happy.
Okay. Sure, that's no problem.
One more question.
Okay.
Does the Parks Department really own that hunk of land? What is that?
Stephen Pote for the record. Interesting history with that piece, and I've spoken with some of the other board members already on this.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't email you ahead of time. I honestly didn't even notice it until now, so.
So the subject parcel, the western lot line was created, let me see if I have a date for you here, in 1954. The subdivision to the west was created with a subsequent map in 1957, so 3 years later. The resultant of that was that gap. So what the history is, why that, if that was a mistake or if it was intentional, I don't know. And then how the city came into ownership of that, I also don't know. But what I do know is that because this parcel was created first, if that parcel were to be disposed of by Carson City or abandoned, that the subject parcel would not be party to an abandonment. So we did not think it was prudent to tie the issue of that parcel to this subdivision.
So you're saying this subdivision is the earlier subdivision, excuse me, the
subject
this
parcel
parcel is the earlier parcel.
Is the earlier parcel, correct?
That's kind of a mess.
Well,
Agreed.
And I would suggest that strip of parkland probably came from this parcel that's being developed now, because if you look at the frontage here, the east leg that comes out to Nye Lane, somewhere between 170 feet, 172 feet. The west leg is 155 feet. If you were going to, in my mind, I like symmetry. I wouldn't make one leg 20 feet less than the other leg. Follow what I'm saying? If I was doing it, they'd both be 170 or 75 feet, whatever it works out to be, not a 20-foot difference. And property owners on Otha have confirmed what you said. That 20-foot section existed when they bought their property in the mid-50s.
Deputy City Manager Hicks, as our old property manager, might have some just fun information.
Thank you. Yes, Stephanie Hicks for the record. We have been looking into this issue for a little while. It was something that came up when I was real property manager, obviously resurfaced again with this project. It is, at this point, there's not a use that we have identified as to a reason why we have this property and it's listed as Parks property. But one of the dilemmas that we have is there are several permanent structures that are encroaching into this strip of land. So there, there'd be some complexity to how we would dispose of it and determine how to either abandon it or otherwise. So it's not something that we couldn't do. I think staff's looking into that. It's just probably going to take a few different courses to get there.
Okay, well, another thing to add to our future to-do list. Sorry, thank you.
Doggone, that's growing.
That's it.
Okay, Supervisor Jones, you have a question?
Yeah, I was under the impression that this half street was kind of a mandatory. I didn't know it was optional. I've had a lot of complaints about that over the years. Is that an option at each different development? I've had people tell me that it wasn't an option to them. They said you have to do it.
Stephen Pote for the record. So the development standard reads that any development is required to install half-street improvements unless existing improvements that are adequate exist. And so, yes, it is not an option. The reason that is worded as an option is just because of, the common sense aspect of looking at the very narrow frontage of this parcel and, the end product being such a small strip. That's why staff thought it prudent to offer that up. But we didn't feel that we as staff had the authority to completely negate the ability to do the full half street and make that a requirement. So
Supervisor Shooty?
I just had a question, comment about schools, and somewhere in the packet, and that's what I was looking for because my tab fell off. When reaching out to schools and the zoning and the potential numbers, how will this plan affect our numbers with schools? And in one of the letters, there was a concern in terms of the school bus and where to park in the infrastructure. So can you just speak briefly to that? And I'm sorry I didn't submit that earlier.
Heather Fariskin, for the record, I can speak briefly to how we reach out to the school district and receive comments from them. So I did reach out in July to let them know that we had this application, to see if they had any comments or concerns. Essentially, and this is on page 299 of the packet, it's in finding 4. Essentially what they have told us, and they have told us this for the last couple of years, is that they're going to need to do some redistricting, but essentially that they are concerned about the capacity. And for every 100 new homes, they anticipate that about 30 new students would result from that. However, they haven't offered up any mitigations. So really, we take their comments. They don't have any concerns beyond the fact that they realize they're going to need to redistrict to accommodate that. That being said, they have told me verbally that with COVID, they're not really sure what their numbers are going to look like. So this could be changing. And then, Stephen, do you want to speak to location of bus stops?
Sorry.
Infrastructure location.
There was just a comment in one of the public comments, a letter, and concern about busing and infrastructure, and apparently the bus travels one way and now it'll need to travel the other way, and for those students. And I don't know if really if
So
what
for
to
school
say to that.
buses?
That's not
Correct.
true.
Gotcha.
It picks up on.
So I didn't have any conversation with the school district on bus stops on this particular project. On other projects in the past, the conversation has been that bus stops often move based on specific houses where children are located. And so there have been projects in the past where a specific area was set aside as a bus stop, and it ended up being abandoned because there just wasn't a use at that location.
Okay.
So we prefer to keep that open-ended and let them choose a proper location. And there is open space and sidewalks and things of that nature.
Great, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions? So I guess our point of discussion then is condition number 29 that Mr. White brought up. I'm a little bit perplexed. I mean, I get it, but everything we've talked about all day today was about the consistency of code and everything else. And if we leave it the way it is, the option is to meet the standard or to not meet the standard. I mean, that's in essence what we're doing here with this alternative is the alternative is to not meet the standard. It's probably the number one complaint that I receive as far as a perceived unfair action, like you said, by all the commercial, and not the developers, because they're used to those being costs anyway, but your individual commercial property that wants to do a small expansion or something like that. We increase the price of their projects immensely by requiring half-street improvements that also can be an improvement to nowhere. You know, the road in front of me has big potholes, the road to the side, and I'm going to do this quarter mile that you make me improve. So I'm just struggling with, are you seeing that as we start doing the rewrites of codes and things, that you guys are going to be trying to do the alternatives in the code? I feel I'm struggling here because I like the alternative, but I don't think it's fair to give it to one and not the others.
So what if we, as a solution, I don't know if this is allowable in the code, what if we have the applicant pay us the equivalent of that and of the half-street paving that is required, and then we use those funds to do whatever work we're going to do next time around on East Nile Lane?
So that we can do a full street improvement, potentially.
I mean, is that within the code? I mean, because I understand what Lori's saying. On the one hand, we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't say, as ridiculous as it sounds, what we'd be asking them to do is do basically two 200-foot hunks of half street with about a 400-foot hunk of undone street in between, which is ridiculous. But at the same time, we have asked others in this community, and I can think of 3 or 4 examples right now of places that are currently under construction where we've told those people they have to do half street improvements, and they shouldn't be allowed to this subdivision shouldn't be allowed to not have to do that. So maybe the alternative is we accept the funds that it would cost to do the half street improvement across those 2 hunks, and we then in turn do the work. It's sort of like the pro rata component that we've done in other cases. So
Same we did for the
I know one
stoplight.
project that was canceled because of the half-street requirement.
well, I mean, anyway, and it's the discussion we had when we were doing that discussion about this whole transportation thing in general was that. But anyway, Stephen, your thoughts?
So it sounds like a couple questions. To answer Mayor Bagwell's question first, no, our intent is not to create options every time with just the standard code. I don't think we do want it to be straightforward and predictable. The reason that we went that way with this project is just because of the unique shape that you have 2 narrow frontages on the same street. And the thought process being that the city and the surrounding residents would benefit more from the continuity of the sidewalk, curb, and gutter, as well as there are drainage issues in this area. So the city benefits from solving some of those drainage issues. So we thought that those benefits outweighed the benefits from the half-street improvements. To answer the question about whether or not we'd be amiable to just collecting a fee and applying it at a later date, I don't believe staff would have an issue with that, but I would encourage the board to keep in mind the timing element of that. Talking to Public Works, it sounds like this project isn't on the next round of improvements that could apply for. So
This road, you mean?
Yeah.
Nye Lane?
Yeah, sorry, Nye Lane. So Nye Lane wouldn't be improved the very next time that this ward is getting street improvements. So it's a certain time away, and there are the potential residents of different varying ages coming in with this subdivision. So there's that additional, pedestrian and vehicle traffic that would benefit from it now versus later. But whether it's prudent to do the improvements now or later is up to the board, I'd say.
Given that, I don't know how, I can't see nothing being done. I mean, obviously you can't not do anything. They have to do something in front of the 2 components here. And it really is a conundrum. I just, I guess all things considered, I'd have to side with the mayor and say, I'm sorry, it's going to look ridiculous, but they need to do the 2 half-street improvements.
Just like we do for everyone else.
I don't see any way around it. Doesn't make sense, but it's also not fair if we do something else.
Board, this is Dan Stuckey. I don't know if Can you all
Okay,
hear
I can
me?
hear you, Mr. Stuckey. Go ahead.
Great. Dan Stuckey, Deputy Public Works Director for the record. So I do want to point out that, you know, these options, per our code, they wouldn't be required to do the sidewalk improvements in front of the parcel that sits in the middle. So although they have the option of not doing those half-street improvements, we are adding costs that they wouldn't normally be responsible to do under the code, and that's those sidewalk improvements. So it's not like we're, you know, the options, and I haven't done a cost comparison of what the options would be. I know half-street improvements are expensive, but sidewalk, curb, and gutter for a decent amount of length is also a cost. So I do want you to consider that as well when you're making this decision. I just wanted
So-
to point that out.
Mr. Stuckey, as a option here, trying to kind of fit, they would give you, let's say we selected the alternative because it adds additional sidewalk that we wouldn't get under the code. So they priced the alternative, they priced the code half-street improvement. We select the alternative because it's the better choice for the area, and they simply deposit if there's a differential. So if the half-street pretend is 100,000 and the alternative is 80, they would then contribute the 20,000 for the city to use when we get to Nye Lane. So that way, the amount of money and the resource that they have to put on the project is identical to what we would do anywhere else. But this way, the project makes sense for the particular area. Does that make sense what I'm saying to you, Mr. Stuckey? So we would have them do the alternative, but they have to pay the differential if there is one, because the sidewalk, you know, if there is one. And that
Yeah.
way I feel
No, that
like we
absolutely
still
makes
meet the
sense.
code. Okay. Everybody like that idea?
Yeah, that
Is that a fair?
absolutely makes sense.
Okay.
The only, as Stephen Pote mentioned, just the timing aspect of that. We do have a limited amount of funding for District 1 for upcoming in 2024. I think we have, you know, 7 or 8 projects that are on that list.
We have
So
no
I just
issue
wanna
with the
make sure that
timing.
it's-
No issue with the timing,
Okay.
Dan. It would just be a direct deposit to our fund to be used on Nye Lane whenever we got there. It won't be a participatory agreement where you have to worry about your 10-year rules and all of that. It would simply be a deposit for the differential. So I agree with you. We don't have to worry about going, we're at year 8.5, because we're not going to do a participatory agreement that we refund if we don't do it, because they're just paying a direct fee for not doing the full or the half-street improvement. Let me
Yeah.
ask the applicant, is that something the applicant, you were going to have to spend the money for the half-street anyway?
That sounds like a great solution.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to make
We
sure.
did estimates also, just so you're
Yes.
aware, and they are similar cost, but we'll go with the highest of the cost.
Right. Does that work for everyone? Do we achieve what we're trying to do, yet make the spirit of the
Well,
actual code?
Right, because what needs to happen is it does need to make sense, because to insist that or to have included a project that really has no merit is foolish, and it undermines, talk about the spirit of a project or spirit of community. I think it's really important that, again, we have this dialogue to talk about how to clean this up. So we're moving forward, what is required of developments truly makes sense to the development, to the neighborhood, to the community.
All right. Does anyone have any further questions?
Just to clarify for you, it's not that you will have to
Pay more
pay
than
the
the
higher,
half-street.
right? I mean, if it's, the half-street is the benchmark, I think is what we're saying.
Right.
So if the half-street is the most expensive and you do the sidewalk, then you would. But if the sidewalk is more expensive than the half-street, then you wouldn't have to pay that difference.
Understood.
Right? I mean, that's what we're saying.
Right.
So,
Right. We're just ensuring that your development is treated the same as everyone else in the community, but doing the right project.
Heather, did you?
I think
Are you
I
going to
have,
make us sound brilliant?
Have the
I think I
words?
have language for you.
I think I do, I
So,
think I do.
so this would be a modification to condition 29. And as I understood it, you would
289.
you would like to eliminate the requirement for the full half-street improvements along the property's frontage. So the first sentence would be deleted. And it would read, in lieu of full-depth half-street paving, the developer shall install sidewalk and curb and gutter along the adjacent parcel in between the section of the project fronting East Nye Lane. Sidewalk, curb, and gutter would also be required along the property frontage. Prior to approval of the final subdivision map, the developer shall provide the city with a check equal to the cost of the difference in the cost of the full half-street improvements and the in lieu alternative based on an engineer's estimate to the satisfaction of the Public Works Director.
That works.
Yep.
Everybody okay with it?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Motion by Supervisor White, please.
I move to approve the tentative subdivision map as presented with the modification of condition 29 as stated by Ms. Ferris.
Any questions? No? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you again to the public for the testimony on that. Okay, we're going to move on to item 15A. Oops, I got to skip different now because we went around that. Okay, so 15A is discussion and possible action regarding a proposed interlocal agreement between Carson City, the DA's office, and the CTA, dealing with that. Is there any questions that anyone had that needs to be specifically brought up on this one? Anybody have anything on the CTA? Nope, we're good. I'll accept a motion. Supervisor Giomi.
I move to approve the agreement as presented.
Have a motion and a second for approval of the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Motion carried unanimously. Clear. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 16. Ms. Paulson, do we have any items?
Yes, I have one, and then Deputy City Manager also has a couple. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to have a joint school board meeting at the next at the next board meeting date, September 2nd, and that will start at 6 p.m. A joint school board and city meeting
It starts at 6 o'clock, the joint part.
on September 2nd.
Okay. Deputy Manager Hicks.
Yes, thank you. I had a couple announcements I wanted to provide to the board. First of all, we will be bringing our strategic plan document back to the board on September 2nd, so you'll be seeing that again shortly, and we look forward to wrapping that up with you. We, if you haven't seen it, there was an announcement that the V&T Railway will be starting their trains again on August 28th. That's a Saturday, and they'll be running it through December 31st. They are doing a little launch or celebration that morning at 9 a.m. at the Eastgate Depot. And if you are able to attend, if you want to let me know, I would be glad to RSVP for you all. The first train is going to leave the station at 10 a.m., but they're asking for, just to celebrate that we're back running, and that will start at 9 a.m. And then lastly, I wanted to let you know that the development agreement for the Budeye Way Affordable Housing Project will be coming to the board on October 21st. We've been working closely with the developers on that. They've been working through some requests that we've made on, a number of affordable units, and they've also been working towards their funding sources, but we believe we'll have everything together for the 21st. That will be for discussion, and then we'll take any comments or corrections that the board has and bring it back the second meeting, we hope, in November for finalization. So those are coming forward.
Supervisor Jones?
Joint meeting with the school board and us. Is this an appropriate time to talk about our strategy meeting also? Is this other meeting?
The joint we will have our regular meeting in the morning in which we'll do our strategic plan and stuff, and then we recess and come back in as a joint board at 6 p.m. So that's good. It'll be your first to do a joint school board. Does any other members of the board have an announcement or requests?
Yeah.
Anything? Supervisor
Um,
Giomi?
A couple of things. One, just wanted to make sure we got a note of it officially that we're going to review that no parking on, as part of the Oak Ridge Drive component. And, you know, I just looked at an overhead map of that parcel and I, on Nye Lane backing up to Otha. And I can see that, you know, 2 or 3 parcels on either end kind of have honored the fact that they've kept their property to themselves, and 3 or 4 in the middle have clearly not, just looking at an aerial map. And I guess it's a fairness issue to me. I don't know how we enforce encroachments in our downtown quarter to the extent that we did, and we let something like this go. So I understand you've been working on it, but my opinion is we should be working on it harder because we're not treating people fairly, and I have an issue with that. So I would like that to be addressed. As far as CTA goes, a quick update, just, you know, the travel, this is just kind of an indication how the travel world has rebounded. I think we're probably going to see another little bit of a sag with the resurgence of Delta, but just to report out, net taxable revenue, I'm talking about room revenue, net taxable revenue. February was the highest February ever. April was the highest April ever. May was the highest May ever. And June was the highest single month all-time net taxable revenue for hotels in Carson City. So, I think part of that is the fact that over the course of time, we've added some mid-range and higher-end chain hotels that we have rooms now. And so, part of that is that the room rates have gone up, but part of it also is that the travel is back in full swing for those periods of time. And so I thought you'd be interested in knowing that information. We had our water sub-conservancy meeting last night. I think I reported out to this board a while back that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has deemed, based on historical use, pretty much the entirety of the Carson River a navigable waterway. And that largely has to do with the log flume, or the logs that floated down the river prior to statehood, in fact, and even into statehood. So the implications of that are being explored by the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District. Really for us, I don't know how big of an impact for our community, but across the region, there's the potential for a huge impact because it brings in a completely different section of the, a different set of federal laws that you have to get to do permitting for anything from bank stabilization to traversing the river either below or over it in any form or fashion. So it's, Water Sub-Conservancy has more work to do, but I wanted to put it on your radar because we may be coming back to governing bodies across the region to talk about a regional approach to either approaching our congressional delegation, potentially trying to litigate the changes, or maybe just trying to do a regional blanket permits. There's a lot of implications there. We just don't know all of it yet, so I just wanted to at least tickle your mind with it and put it on your radar. That's it. Yeah, and on my Facebook page, I posted, and I'll show them to those of you who didn't see it, but yeah, Lahontan, the inflow to Lahontan is sometime by the end of this week or the reply to next week, the outflow below Lahontan Dam will stop. So farmers below Lahontan Dam will not be able to irrigate from river water. They'll have to rely on underground water if they have those rights, and a lot of them don't. So it will be the end of the irrigation and growing season here by, at the latest, next week. Almost 3/4 of the water coming into Lawton this year has come from the Truckee River, and just a little over 25% has come from the Carson River. And in most years, it's closer to 50-50 or even a little bit the other way. But, you know, Lawton is not the lowest it's ever been, but it's one of the lowest levels it's ever been.
Thank you. So I'd like to just let everyone know that we received the population numbers from the census. So for Carson City, it is 58,639, which is a 6.09% growth over the 10 years. So a little more than 0.5% a year. And I just think it's important for the public to understand when we talk about growth. And I think what's happened is you have to also consider the growth in the communities around us doing the same thing. So when people say, oh, the traffic, they really were guessing we were at 65,000. It's like, we're not, but we have a lot of transitory traffic that comes through Carson City because of the growth in Douglas County and Lyon County. So I just thought it was important to let you all know that's what we'll be utilizing for our redistricting and when it comes to us. So 58,639, just in reference for you all, the 2010 answer was 55,274.
Did you get the numbers from, because to your point, I think we're going to see that particularly Lyon County, but maybe Douglas County to a lesser extent, grew bigger than we did.
Lyon did.
And so what is Lyon County's population now? Did you
Just
see it?
right, I did, and I didn't write it down, but it's like slightly higher than the 58,639. Yeah, they
So I
just
think
took us
that's,
over.
you know, part of that whole thing that we always talk about as being the regional hub, and so growth outside of our community is always going to impact our community.
Yep, always. So I just wanted to bring that up. Anybody, nothing else? Oh, Ms. Schutte, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So we had a meeting, Parks and Rec, and we're working on the consistent policy for dogs, leashes, where it's appropriate to have dogs leashed, where it's appropriate to allow dogs off leash. And so it's been some really great discussion. People are very interested in this. And so we are moving slowly and thoughtfully to make sure we get it right and fair and consistent.
Thank you. Okay, no one else has anything to bring up under item 16? All right, then we're going to move to our final public comment, and I'll start with, is there any final public comment on the phone?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Thank you so much. Any public comment from the newspaper? Since we're down to one, none? I need to technically ask, though. Thank you very much. Okay, if there's no objection, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for a good meeting.